Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of What If Naruto Had Political Marriage with Temari. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 25. Ghosts of the Pasts. Temari couldn't believe it was the same person in front of her. It had been over a year ago since she had last seen the older girl. Before her stood a young woman of 17, her long brown hair was tied off into a single long ponytail that fell behind the pulled-down hood of the cloak. The large battle fan was closed, but Temari knew that the pattern of a certain dessert flower would have been shown. Long time see Temari, she said in a neutral tone. I heard you got married. Well, congratulations, I supposed, even if it's only a political marriage. I hope that wasn't him I just killed. Temari looked to where Naruto had gone and saw all the trees covering the area. It looked bad, but she knew that something like that wouldn't kill Naruto. At least that was her hope. She also wanted to make sure that they didn't check to make sure Naruto was dead. So she glared back at the other woman. What are you doing here, Kimi-senpai? They told me that you had been killed on a mission, Temari demanded to know. The woman, only known as Kimi, laughed. So that's what they told you? Well, I suppose you could have said that, to the village I am dead, or maybe I should say that the village of Suna is dead to me after what they did. Temari could see the hatred in the woman's face and eyes. What could have happened to cause this in her? She still remembered the day she had met the older girl, back when she had just been starting out. Suna. 4 years ago. Temari was nearly done her training to be made an official genin of Suna. She was proud of herself. She pushed herself to be the very best in her age range, even to those of a few older children as well. But it wasn't enough for her. She was a Hokage's daughter, so the demand on her was very high. But she didn't break under the pressure. In fact, it was one of the few things she had in life. Her family was broken beyond repair. Even at this young age she knew that much. Her mother was long since dead. Her father was a cold and distant man. Her brothers, well, Kankuro wasn't too bad, but Gaara scared her. Hell, he scared everyone really, but that was her lot in life and she would proudly bear with the weight of it all. At the moment they were looking at a large selection of weapons. They were told to pick something that they would be trained in. Temari, however, didn't have the slightest idea of what to pick. By this point she had learned that she had wind nature affinity, so she was thinking of a weapon that would be for that. But what was best for that? Technically anything could be used to mold chakra, especially if a weapon was designed to admit the flow of chakra into them. But still, it was difficult for her as she knew next to nothing about weapons. Oh sure, they were taught the basics, but that didn't mean you knew how to handle them, how they felt in your hands in battle, and how comfortable you were with the weapons. Got a problem there, shorty? Said a female voice. Temari got annoyed at being called that. She turned to see who would dare call her something like that. She saw a taller and older girl. By the headband on her forehead, the girl was most likely a genin. There was something large on her back and she had a short ponytail for a hairstyle. She was also smiling at Temari like a Cheshire cat. What did you call me? Temari asked in a serious tone, at least as serious as a young girl like her could. Oh, did I make you a little mad? Sorry, the girl said as she ruffled Temari's hair, which only annoyed the younger girl more. So then what's the issue? Usually everyone knows what type of weapon they want to use. I'm trying to find something for wind chakra, Temari told the older girl, annoyed. Oh, she smiled as a look got into her eye. I got the perfect weapon for that. What, that big stick? Temari said deadpanned. Now the older girl looked irritated and that made Temari smirk. The older girl reached behind her and pulled the stick out and unfolded it. It was a large fan with 3 flower pictures on it. Let me show you how wrong you are, little girl. With that she turned and waved the fan. A huge rush of air came out of the fan as a long cut was created into the ground. It was nearly 20 feet long and several of the people in charge were already yelling at her for doing something reckless like that. Kimi, what the hell were you thinking? Another genin yelled out. Kimi scratched the back of her head in embarrassment. Oops, sorry about that. Just showing a kid how to use it. Temari, although she wasn't sure she liked the older girl, had to admit that it had been very impressive. She had no idea that a fan could be used like that, and it sparked her imagination. A fan like that in the right hands would be a very powerful weapon. She had wind nature chakra and a weapon like that might be perfect for her. How come I don't see that here? Temari pointed to the vast supply of weapons shown on the long tables. Kimmy just smiled as he put away her fan, because not everyone can handle the weapon. It's a lot harder to use than most people think. In fact, there's only a few battle fan users every generation in this village. But it's a proud lineage to belong to. Temari could see that the older girl believed that from the sudden serious look on her face and especially in the eyes. Temari felt herself drawn for some reason, almost like destiny was calling out to her at this very moment. She looked back at the clean-cut line in the ground. It really was a formidable weapon. I want to learn that then. Will you teach me? Temari said. Hell no, Kimmy said. Temari nearly face-faulted at that. Why the hell not? She yelled at the older girl. I don't feel like wasting my time, Kimmy said as she looked bored. Most people wash out and honestly I got better things to do with my time. Although I doubt the few others would take you up on it. Do you know who I am? Temari thought, trying to play the Kage's daughter card. Although she really hated to use that, she wanted to prove herself, but how could she when the girl wasn't going to give her a chance? Yep. Still don't care, Kimmy said with a shrug. Temari wasn't sure if she was impressed that the older girl was going to go against her like this or pissed because it hadn't worked. Kimmy looked down at the annoyed look on the younger girl's face and smirked. She did know who the girl was the daughter of, but she believed in getting what you wanted from your own hard work. Although she was a bit worried on what might happen, but she had a feeling this girl wasn't as bad as the stories she had heard about Gaara. At least that was what she hoped. Temari wanted to train in the fan not only because she was interested but if only to get this girl to do it. Temari hated to lose to anything and she wouldn't lose this. I want to learn, and if you're too lazy to do it then I'll find someone else. Maybe someone even better, Temari said and grinned when she saw the other girl finally get angry. Hey, I'm the best one there is, and for your information I don't want to train someone that will most likely quit in the first week. I'll make it more than just a week, Temari said back, glaring at her. Oh yeah, well fine. Let's just see how long you last. Kimmy didn't realize she had fallen for that trick until later, but when she did, Kimmy swore that she would make the little brat pay. Temari had no idea just the kind of training that went with a battle fan, but she would soon learn. -3 months later. Hurry up, Temari, Kimmy called as she ran through one of the large mountain passes that was built into the natural barrier of their village. Temari was behind her, panting heavily with a lot of sweat dripping down her face. The two of them always ran up these trails because it gave a good exercise. Kimmy was doing a lot better, but that was because she trained more. Temari, who was now carrying her own iron fan, wasn't used to the weight yet. Kimmy told Temari that in order to use such a large weapon you needed to get used to it. You had to take that weapon with you on any mission, into any battle and over long distances. If you couldn't carry it then you would slow down your group, and if you couldn't lift it after a hard run, well, what use were you? Temari, however, never said a word of complaint. She pushed on and on, willing her body to move sometimes. Kimmy had gotten to know the younger girl a bit better over the past few months. The young girl really was a truth kunoichi. She pushed herself harder than most boys, and it wasn't just because of her father, it was because the girl actually wanted to be this good. That impressed Kimmy a lot, although she never once said so. The girl didn't need an ego, plus this way she got to play the bad guy, and force all kinds of horrible training methods that she herself had been forced to do. Kimmy now understood why she had been pushed like she had been. The battle fan was a rare art in their village, but a proud one that the women who used it took seriously. Only women chose to use the fan for battle, most likely because most men thought it was too silly. Well, those men usually were the ones that ended up on the other side of their fans. But still, to wield the fan wasn't easy. It took diligence, heart and iron will. But thankfully in Temari she saw all these things. As they came to a shadowed area she felt it was time to stop. Temari, we're going to take a break here. I can still go on, Temari breathed out, not wanting to look weak. Please, you're barely standing and I'm not going to drag your body and your fan back, Kimmy said as she sat down and took a sip of water. You didn't drink it whole in the dessert, you made it last as you never knew when your next drink would come from. Sit and drink, girl. Temari, although she didn't say it, was thankful for the rest. Her back ached carrying her fan, her legs and lungs were burning and she felt a little lightheaded. The cramping told her that she was starting to dehydrate as well. At any rate, she sat in the shade and took small sips of water. The two girls enjoyed the shade as they felt the cool rocks soothe their bodies lightly. Kimmy was about to take another small sip when she heard someone behind them. She spun around and looked up, then she blushed lightly. Oh, good reflexes, a boy her own age said as he was on a higher path only about 6 feet above them. He had a boyish smile and features, short dark hair that was cropped off in a wild haircut. He wore brown and dark clothing of light material as he jumped down to meet them. Kensai-kun. What are you doing here? Kimmy said, surprised. Just on a little sentry duty today, he explained. I was making a patrol and saw you two jogging, so this is the Temari girl I've been hearing about. The Kage's daughter. Temari stood up as he looked over the older boy. She noticed how Kimmy seemed to be acting a little different around him. In fact, she noticed the slight blush forming on the older girl's face as the boy was pretty close. Temari got a small smirk on her face seeing this. Yes, I am. So are you Kimmy-senpai's boyfriend? Kimmy looked both angry and embarrassed at that, giving Temari a glare and mentally cursing the girl. She was going to have gone easy, but now she was going to tack on a few more miles to their run for this. Kensai looked confused and then laughed as he placed his arm around Kimmy, whose face went totally red in that moment. Well, not yet, but I'm working on it. Kensai-kun. Kimmy yelled at him. Temari could see she was going to have a lot of fun with this from now on. And she could get in some revenge for all this crazy training that Kimmy was putting her through. Nearly 1 year later, Temari was coming back from a small mission. It was just a small sentry patrol of the village, something that everyone did once in a while as the village was to be defended. Sentry duty, although being boring, was very vital, so no one complained. Plus, since it was still in the village, even genins like her could do it. Well, she wasn't any normal genin, like the rest of her team. She was actually thankful for the break from her teammates. Konkuro was driving her nuts with his new project on some new doll of his that he claimed would be his greatest one yet. Plus there was also Gaara. She felt shivers running through her body. At first she had tried to be the sister to him. But Gaara didn't look at her as a sister. When he did look at her with those cold, nearly dead eyes, she kept on asking herself, was this the day he would kill her? That constant stress wasn't good for her or Konkuro, but they were the only ones that could work with Gaara. Or maybe she should say the only ones made to work with him. People had actually quit being a ninja rather than work with him, and with good reason, sadly. She was thinking of going to see Kimmy-senpai. The older girl was still reeling from the death of Kensai. Temari also felt heartache for the death of that man. She didn't know all the details, only that a few days ago, while on a mission to investigate a group getting too close to the village, he had been killed. Apparently it had been a group from another village spying, most likely. Her Senesi and Gaara had been sent with the team to back them up. Apparently there had been heavy fighting and casualties on either side. Kensai had been one of them. She had never seen Kimmy cry until that day. The next day Temari had been ordered on sentry duty. She wanted to be there for Kimmy though. In the time she had known her, the two had become very close. But duty always came first for a ninja, so Temari would make for Kimmy's place as soon as she could. But while coming into the more populated areas of the village, she noticed that a lot of people were rushing about. Something was going on, that much she was sure of. She could feel how stressed the people were, so she ran towards the central building that was used as both office of the Kage and all related ninja matters. If anyone knew what was going on, then someone there would. She also kept an eye out for anyone she knew. She had just nearly made it to the front door when she spotted her sensei walking out. She called out to him as he waited for her to get closer. Baki-sensei, what's wrong? There was an assassination attempt on Gaara, Baki told her. He didn't need to add. Another assassination attempt, as people have tired to kill Gaara as far back as a young child. Although it had been a long time since that last happened, mainly due to the fact that all the others had failed and then been killed. Temari was surprised that anyone would even bother to try anymore, but she steeled herself to this long ago. Everyone knew that the assassins for the most part had once been ordered by her own father. She had once overheard him late at night once, angry at a failed attempt. That was when she first started to see her father for what he was and what he would do. But since Gaara had made genin they had stopped, mainly due that he was a weapon for their village now. The mission he was sent on were usually suicidal for a genin to be assigned, but he always came back. I thought this had ended, Temari commented more to herself than to her sensei. This was an unofficial mission, Baki told her, and Temari looked up in shock. If this wasn't an official order, that meant all involved, if they even lived, would face execution. There is more. Temari, how well did you know that girl Kimi? Well enough. Temari was confused as to why he asked, but she suddenly got a sick feeling in her stomach. Why do you ask, sensei? She was one of the members trying to kill Gaara when he was on the north wall. I'm sorry, but it looks like she was killed. Baki told her. Temari didn't hear anything other than that. The one person she had outside of her normal family and team was dead. The person she had looked up to, that had inspired her to be what she was, the one that was the closest thing to a sister she ever thought in her life, was now dead. Killed by her very own little brother because she had tried to kill him. In the month that followed, she tried to make sense of it all. Why did Kimi try to kill Gaara? Sure, there were many that wanted to, but she had no reason for it. For a while she had entertained that maybe her father had told them to, but would deny any official mission if they were caught. It wasn't unheard of to be called up for missions like that. But still, it never made total sense. After that, Temari closed herself off. She tried to become harder and steal her heart from the pain of that loss. But still, she never forgot Kimi. Present. I was told that you were dead. Temari looked up at her mentor, the woman that was the closest thing she could call a sister in this world. In a way, I did die that day, Kimi said with dead eyes as she thought back for a second on her past. But she came back into focus as she looked at Temari with naked hatred. But when that stupid village took from me the best thing in my life and then wouldn't see justice done, it betrayed me. So I turned my back on that village and never once looked back. What are you talking about? Temari was wondering what was going on. Is this about Kensai? Don't you dare say his name. Kimi shouted at her. You don't deserve to, not given what your family did to him. My family. Now Temari was even more confused, but if she could get her talking, it would also shed light on what had happened. It would also give her team time to get to this location. They didn't tell you, Kimi said almost sarcastically. I wasn't told at first either, but one of the survivors on the missions told me. Things were going fine. Then your little demon of a brother showed up. He saw all the blood on the sand and he apparently lost it. He killed anyone that got in his way, even our own people, even. Now Temari's eyes widened in horror as she knew what was coming. She had never known. Sure, she knew that Gaara had done some pretty horrible things in his time. Killed lots of people, even their own Suna ninja when they got in his way or when they tried to kill him. But she had never known about Kensai. She wanted to say something, but what could you say? It wasn't like she could just say, sorry, and that would make it better. The truth was, she couldn't say anything at all. Kimi looked at the blonde girl, and now it looks like you're a leaf ninja now. She pointed at the new symbol Temari wore. Hard to believe, but we'll talk later when you wake up. Temari was about to ask what she meant, but she saw the kick coming, but she was too late to do anything. The kick was solid and connected to her head. There was a second of blinding pain and she thought she saw stars for a moment before the world spun and fell dark. Kakashi and Natsu. The fight was going fairly roughly for Kakashi for the moment. He was a little out of practice with it came to swordplay. Sure, he kept up the skills, but it was different when you haven't used them in battle for a while. Plus, the person he was fighting was no amateur. Normally in a fight like this, if you couldn't take out the opponent, you would gain some ground and use something like ninjutsu. This person, however, wasn't letting him, so this person was obviously smart. Thankfully Kakashi was keeping pace, but the other guy was dragging things out, letting the others on his team to have the time to get to this area. With his eye he could see where the man would strike and Kakashi was able to keep his kunai blocking or parrying it. But the other man was very quick, and with the short swords his opponent had, the man kept them in short-range combat and never gave Kakashi the chance to move far enough away to use ninjutsu skills. It was smart for someone that seemed to favor close combat skills. But the only problem was that the guy was very fast, so fast that Kakashi felt the blades managed to cut into his vest a couple of times. He felt a light cut on one of his arms by this point. He wasn't sure when that happened, but the stinging sensation was finally showing up. But it was mainly superficial, and the cuts on his vest weren't deep enough to get past it. The vest was created to protect you after all. The heavy material and the light armor plating in the front and back helped to stop things like blades. It wasn't perfect. The armpits were exposed, which was lethal to get stabbed in. The front of the neck was also exposed, the sides had weaker padding, and the armor was mainly a plate on the back and something over the upper chest, and it was very thin. The vest also limited your top speed, but veterans like Kakashi had trained to increase their speed to compensate. But there was one other thing that Kakashi could do to keep up with the man, and that was the other skill of his present from Obito. "You're copying my moves," Natsu said while grinning as he realized what Kakashi was doing. So the rumors of the power of that eye were true. To tell the truth, I'm actually glad. As a swordsman, this makes even better. There is nothing like fighting an opponent that only gets stronger as you fight. So I suppose you know how my eye can copy movement? Kakashi asked. And also predict movement, which explains how well you've managed to keep ahead of me the entire time. Tell me, is it true those eyes can make you read minds, or is that just a rumor from how the Uchiha could predict movement? Kakashi knew that there were many things said about the Sharingan. Many were from stories by enemies that had survived battles against the Uchiha, and some were most likely put out there by the Uchiha clan themselves. Disinformation was a very powerful weapon in the world after all. So Kakashi had a feeling this guy didn't know all about what the Sharingan could fully do. Well, he was running out of ideas at this point given the time he was wasting. They locked blades as he managed to get eye contact with the other ninja. "One thing you didn't know, I bet," Kakashi told him. "And what's that?" Natsu asked, grinning. He never got an answer as something weird was going on with the Sharingan eye. The small black totems were starting to spin. It was odd, and he started to feel a sense of falling. He quickly knew that a genjutsu was being placed on him. He broke eye contact and stabbed forward, thinking he hit his target. However, the image of Kakashi wavered and slowly disappeared. What the hell? He felt a sharp pain in the back of his skull before the world went dark. Kakashi stood behind him, breathing hard. It was a simple genjutsu he had used. Mainly, it only created an after-image in the other person's eyes. It wouldn't really have worked against someone with more genjutsu skill, but Kakashi had bet that the man had focused more of his time in sword fighting. Specializing like that always cost you in other skills, and he was glad that the other man had ended up not training in genjutsu. Kakashi didn't know many skills in that. His eye usually helped him to see through illusions, not create them, but he had picked up a few tricks here and there. He pulled the kunai out of the man's skull, letting him fall to the grass. He said nothing, as nothing needed to be said. As a ninja, this was the fate of this life. They met, they fought, and only one would walk away. Kakashi had been through this countless times, and he knew this wouldn't the last. He moved off from the battle. He had a mission to continue and a team to find. Sasuke and Sakura, the two other members of Team 7, had it slightly easier than the others. That is, if you call trying to rush through an area filled with lethal traps while trying not to get killed or mauled by them, easy. All too often they would have to chance course to avoid a trap, or had been slowed down when one was set off. It had seemed their trap expert liked to experiment with various types of traps, even laying down fake ones that would take your eye off the real danger. Sasuke was getting very annoyed at the whole thing. Sure, he was doing well, but he felt that Sakura was slowing him down. Although his teammate had improved since Temari had joined, the girl was still the dead last of their group. It was odd how Naruto used to be the king of that title, but even Sasuke had to admit that Naruto had grown in power since then. What he couldn't get was why Naruto had gotten so strong and why it had been so fast. The guy was an orphan, had no clan, no real talent, and yet he had improved in leaps and bounds since becoming a genin. For someone like Sasuke, that hurt his pride, and for an Uchiha, pride was something that they held close to them. By the time they did manage to reach the area where Temari and Naruto had last been seen, the place looked like a storm had hit it. There were blown over trees, the ground was torn up and two large piles of trees were there. What happened? Sakura asked, looking at the area. She had never seen Temari go all out like this before, but she had an idea that this was Temari's handiwork. It was just a lot more powerful than what she had seen while training with the ex-Suna nin. Where are Naruto and Temari? Sakura asked Sasuke as she started to look around for clues. I don't see them anywhere, Sasuke remarked as he scanned the area. He didn't see any obvious signs like blood from nasty wounds, or pieces of clothing. It was hard to tell what tracks were from what, as the whole area was littered with damage, making it hard to track. Plus, neither of them were tracking experts, simple things they were taught in the academy, but for this kind of challenge you needed someone with a lot more experience. Naruto. Temari. Sakura called out. It was a risk to call out like that with possible enemies around, but she had to at least try and see if they could respond. She tried a few more times before she thought she heard something. It was faint, but she thought it came from one of the two large piles of wrecked tree piles. She gently moved to it and called out again. Now that she was closer, she could definitely hear something. In fact, it sounded like, Naruto, is that you? Sakura called out. She heard a groan as something moved under the large log that Sakura was leaning on, trying to see into the mess. She thought she caught a glimpse of orange under it all. Finally, all that loud orange finally seemed to pay off. Naruto, are you okay? Sakura asked him. My arm hurts. Can't move it and I think I'm stuck, Naruto said as he tried to move but grunted in pain as his shoulder and arm flared up in pain. He tried to remember what had happened. The last thing that happened was that he and Temari had finished off that one guy, and then a large wind happened. Then he woke up like this. How's Temari-chan? We're looking for her but we're not sure where she is, Sakura told him. Then get me out of here. Ow. Damn it, that hurt, Naruto said as he tried to get out. Naruto, don't move, we'll get you out of there, Sakura told him, hoping that he would calm down before he hurt himself more. She looked around the place trying to see how they could move the pieces of trees. They were very large and she couldn't see where to even being. She looked to Sasuke hoping that he had an idea. Any ideas? She asked him. Sasuke looked at the pile and sighed, not sure, this could take some time. Sakura sighed as she hoped that Naruto would keep calm. Naruto, looks like this might take a bit, but just keep calm and we'll get you out, okay? Just hurry, I think something is crawling up my shirt and I don't like it, Naruto told her. He tried not to worry about where Temari was and what could have happened to her. But as soon as he got out of this, he was going to find her and get her back, and that was a promise. Chapter 26. Prisoner. By the time Kakashi made it to where he found the rest of his team, Sakura and Sasuke were already trying to dig Naruto out of the wreckage he was under. He had to admit, it was lucky that Naruto wasn't killed. If his head had been caught between two of those trunks, it would have been crushed, and not even the Nine Tails could have fixed that. It did have its limits after all. After he got a small and very short report while helping out, he got an idea of what happened. Sakura and Sasuke had been slowed down by the traps and got here too late to help. Temari and Naruto had taken one member out but had been surprised by a wind user by the looks of things. Naruto said he didn't get a good look at things as he had been blindsided, it seemed. Temari wasn't in the area, and from what he could see in the tracks it was clear to him. He called out his hounds to get them to track down Temari as he helped to dig Naruto out from the broken trees. They would be able to track them before they got too far away. While digging out Naruto, he took notice of the area as well. Looking at the signs of disturbance in the grass and ground, as well as other signs he saw. Whoever the other person was, it was obviously female from the small and light footprints. Although she did seem to be carrying something heavy, as the prints were deeper for a person of that kind of height and weight. Even on average size of the person he could estimate from the footprint, she was carrying some weight that wasn't her own. Maybe armor or a large weapon of some kind was his best guess. He had seen where Temari had most likely been sitting. This he got from the disturbance in the ground, as well as the damage to the bark of the tree she had been against. Then it looked like the female tracks got heavier, most likely from carrying Temari and her fan by that point. That was a lot of weight, which was a good thing for them. It would slow down the girl, but if she caught up with her team, then they would be able to travel faster by splitting the load. Well, the enemy had been more prepared, it seemed, or maybe it was just bad luck they had run into someone with traps experience. If they had run into someone else, the battle would most likely had gone much differently, and with the possibility of the enemy not being aware of them. Now that option wasn't there. Of course, now that they had Temari, things changed even more. They would have to chase after them now. Kakashi didn't abandon his teammates, not anymore at least. He made that mistake once, and once was enough. Plus there was also the political fallout. Temari just happens to die on a mission outside the village away from witnesses so soon after the marriage. The trip to Snow had worried him at first, but he thought that things wouldn't get too bad. Well, that hadn't gone to plan either. Thankfully things had turned out okay. Only now it was Temari that was captured and not Naruto this time around. So if Temari were killed in this mission, well, it wouldn't be good. He was sure that there would be a number of people that would raise hell over that issue in both villages. Some in Suna would blame Konoha, and it could hurt the new alliance as it was still very fragile. He sighed. This was why Kakashi hated politics. This was why Kakashi felt uncomfortable with this marriage deal. Not only had it put Naruto in a tough spot, but also made things harder for both villages if something were to happen to them. Well, at least Naruto was happy with Temari. That was something that Kakashi was glad for. For too long he had to just observe Naruto from the shadows as he grew up. He knew who Naruto's parents were from the start, but he couldn't do anything. So he stuck to the shadows when he could to watch. He couldn't watch him all the time as he was highly busy, most likely the main reason he couldn't have looked out for the boy. He also knew that Naruto wouldn't stop until they had Temari back. So Kakashi would see to it that the new Team 7 wasn't broken on its first major mission. They finally managed to dig out Naruto as he was holding his shoulder. There was some blood on his lip, either from a split lip or something else. Kakashi couldn't see any open wounds, most likely healed by now, as well as any internal injuries. He looked at the arm and noticed from years of combat injuries that Naruto's shoulder was dislocated. Naruto, I'm going to have to pop your shoulder back in. This will hurt for a moment. On 3 I'll do it, okay? Kakashi told him as he gripped his arm and shoulder. Naruto didn't say anything, he just nodded as he clenched his jaw. Kakashi could see the same look of determination that he had when Naruto had plunged his own kunai into his hand to get the poison out of it. Kakashi counted to 1, then wrenched the arm back into the socket without even getting to the count of 2. Naruto screamed out in pain for a second before glaring at Kakashi. What happened to 2 and 3? Naruto asked him, feeling his arm hurt, but he could at least move it now. This way you don't flinch at 3 and it makes it easier to put back in. Plus when you're expecting pain it's the worse. Kakashi said with a shrug as Naruto pouted at the man, clearly not happy about it. Now come on. We need to hurry and give chase, but keep your guard up. We don't know how many there are left or what they have planned. But Temari is now bait for us, they'll try and use her against us. They better not harm her. Naruto growled out. Don't worry Naruto, we'll get her back. Sakura said, trying to comfort him, but he didn't say anything. He was too focused on getting back Temari. Team 7 followed the trail. Soon it seemed that the tracks they were following were met up with a few more. Kakashi counted a total of 3 now. There might be more, but he felt confident that was their total forces for the ninja. There might be other surprises, but nothing they shouldn't be able to handle. Along the way one of his dogs was running towards them. They paused as the dog came up to them. The dog had what Kakashi thought was a pair of sticks at first. But then the hound let them drop to the ground. They hadn't been on the ground for more than a second before Naruto ran towards them and took them. He grimaced as he felt the dog slobber on them, but he didn't care, he knew what they were. They were the smaller fans that he gave Temari as a present. These belong to Temari-chan's, Naruto said, looking at the small battle fans. He still remembered how happy she had been with his gift, the first real gift he had given someone too. Was this dropped by Temari to show us the way or dropped by the ninja to lure us in? Sakura asked Kakashi. Could be either one honestly, but let's hurry. They can't be too far ahead of us by this point. Kakashi said as they traveled on. Naruto putting the fan into his equipment pouch, he was sure to give this gift back to Temari when he got the chance. Kane's headquarters. In the large grounds hidden in a forest stood the compound where the criminal known as Kane held his seat of power. However, he was not happy with the report he had just gained from the ninja he had hired. He had been looking over reports and giving out orders when a messenger gave him a short report from the leader of the rogue ninja group. What he read wasn't something he was pleased with. 2 ninja were dead. Too bad that wouldn't lower the price for their services. Thankfully they weren't asking for more payment, but at this moment he was wishing they would. He had left his office as he made his way down the halls. The place had once been home to a small-time lord from Wave who fell on hard times. Mostly due to gambling problems, and the place had to be sold off. After Gato died, Kane had given time setting this place up. It was like a small fortress, which was perfect for him. It also held a small dungeon, which was where he was heading now. He found the door to the lower levels. The cold dark stone was there to meet him as he carefully walked his way down passing guards. He came to one of the few cells with the ninja gathered there arguing over what to do with their prisoner. He cast a look and saw a young blonde teenage girl chained up to the floor. She looked a little beat up but nothing major. He wasn't shocked or anything by her age. Hell, he had seen younger boys in street gangs killing each other off. So a young ninja like this was nothing to him. I still say we should kill her for what she did to Jin, said a young woman with long red hair. She wore a large black cloak with a hood with strange paint on her face. It was all white with red marking, making her look like some kind of doll. Kane thought she was the one called Yoko. Because she's bait, Guro the large leader said to her. They'll come to us now. So, Yoko asked him. With Natsu and Jin gone, we're at a loss. Plus it's not like they'll know she's dead either. Idiot, Kimi said to her, who was resting against a wall looking bored. After this we can ransom her to Suna or Konoha. Given how important she is, or even use her death to start a war between them. If you paid attention more to world events you would know this. Personally I would rather whatever hurts Suna gets my vote. Wow. That's so cold of you. Wasn't that your village before? Yoko teased only to get a glare from the older girl. That village is dead to me, Kimi said coldly. Kane felt it was time to address his hired help as it were. Guro, I thought I hired you to take care of that wave village. And what do I get? This page saying that you were defeated and only managed to take 1 hostage. Guro, even though a large man, could see that Kane wasn't one to cower before him. That was a rare thing, but most likely because his current employer wasn't weak like most criminals. Even though the other man's tone wasn't condescending, he could hear the annoyance in it. It was a tactical loss. I didn't expect a seasoned opponent. They came at use from the sides instead of a stealth move up the middle of our formation. The girl is only the bait to lure them here, plus we're keeping her alive as a dead hostage is no good if they want proof. Guro cast a look to Yoko, who just sniffed at the last comment. But why here? Kane asked of him, feeling slightly angered that the man would use his place for this. I do have other areas under my control that you could have used. And now that team is most likely on their way here. I can't have a battle here of all places. Guro just shrugged. This is the best defended area, plus all the men you have here will be used to slow down and weaken the enemy force. You're not using my men as cannon fodder, you don't get to make that choice. Kane told him. We're at a numbers disadvantage, Guro said calmly. We need to weaken them down, then we can take them out. When we do, you can do what you want with the girl. Maybe you can ransom her back to Suna or something, it would make up for any damages. After her team is taken care of, we no longer need her, then we'll get back to the mission at hand. Kane thought about that. Sure, he didn't like to waste resources. It took time and money to get good help and to train up his people. He didn't like the thought of throwing them away just to weaken a small group. But this small group were ninja, and he knew that in a fight his men couldn't stand up to that. They were too well trained, too experienced, and too powerful for normal people to take on. Plus, looking at the Suna girl who was quietly looking at them with a cold look, there might be some profit in it. If she was important and it was found out he had a hand in her death, he want a village posting a bounty on his head. But to ransom her back, well, that could be something else entirely. She might want revenge for being captured and her team killed. But honestly, she wouldn't be able to unless it was an official mission. Ninja got captured and ransomed before. It was rare, but it did happen if the person was important enough and they didn't have to kill said person. He might make enough profit to cover his losses, maybe even a bit more if he was lucky enough. Fine then, but be sure you kill these other ninja. Then we can ransom the girl back and be done with it. Kane told his hired ninja. Meanwhile, Temari had been watching silently the entire time. She was taking mental notes on everything she could. She had been doing since she first woke up in this cell. The first thing she noticed was that she was sitting down and chained up in a dark, stone cell. Her cold ass told her that she had to have been sitting there for a while. She had first felt a moment of panic before her training kicked in. She had to remain calm and steady. She had to escape, that was her first duty. She noticed that they had stripped her of her gear. Plus her arms were shackled above her head. She couldn't move them and her shoulder that had been injured, was now screaming out at the rest of her body. Then the others had come in. She had kept quiet as they had argued over what to do with her. Thankfully they seemed to be in a hurry. That meant they didn't have time to get any kind of information out of her about her team. She was thankful for that, not as if she could have said anything anyway. But if she had been physically tortured, it would have given her troubles escaping. She didn't fear that. As a ninja, it was expected when captured. She just got lucky this time. When the others had finally left and for some reason Kimmy was still there against the wall. Now that it was just them, Temari felt it was time to get some questions answered. Temari looked at the women across from her through the bars of the door. I was told you were dead, but it seems that was a lie to me for some reason. Kimmy looked at her for a moment, not totally Temari. When I learned what that monster you call a brother did, I went to the cage. I begged and demanded that Gaara be punished for his actions, and you know what? I was told to forget it, to leave it alone. The contempt on Kimmy's face and in her voice was all too clear. They said that Gaara was too valuable as a weapon. They said that those that got in a way should have been more careful. They talked about those that died like they were nothing. They treated them like nothing. They treated him like he was nothing. He wasn't nothing to me, and when they told me to go, I couldn't take it anymore. They just shrugged it off as though it hadn't happened, but to those left behind, we couldn't stand for it. We found out that they sent Gaara out alone to keep him away from others just in case he was feeling more bloodthirsty. So we went to finally finish off that monster. Kimmy rubbed her arm as though an old injury was acting up. We thought we could surprise him. We were wrong. He slew us like we were nothing to him. I was knocked off the wall. I don't know how far I fell or how many times I smashed against the wall before I blacked out. One of the people who were sympathetic to us found me. He told me I was a mess and barely alive. He told the others I had been killed by the fall. I guess I looked bad enough to pass that off. Kimmy pulled her sleeve to show many ugly-looking scars on the skin. I woke up a month later from a coma. My body was a mess and I found I was hidden in someone's home. They cared for me until I was healthy enough to leave. I was listed as dead in the village, and so if I showed my face I would be executed. So one night at a shift change I left the village, and you know what? I never looked back. That village took from me the only man I've ever loved, the best thing in my life. Temari could see all the anger and pain in Kimmy's eyes and voice. She wanted to tell her she was sorry that it had happened, that she never wanted any of this to happen. That Gaara had changed and he wasn't the monster he used to be. But it all died in her throat. How could she tell her any of this? The woman had lost everything. She had every right to be angry. There was nothing she could say to take any of the pain and suffering the woman had gone through. Her heart broke because she knew that her brother and father were to blame for her pain. There was no way to make up for it, no way that she could take it all back. There was an ugly silence there between them. Kimmy seemed too tired of it and left Temari alone in the dark dungeon-like area. Temari watched as the woman who had shaped her life walked away. She listened to the footsteps going up the stone steps. Temari closed her eyes as she listened to everything around her. She counted her heartbeats as well. Once she was up to 100, and after hearing no other noise than her heart and her breathing, she knew she was alone. Now it was the time for action. She looked up to get a better look at how her arms were chained up. She could tell that the manacles on her riders were held above her head. Also, the chain to the wall was so short that she couldn't move her arms all that much. This prevented her from moving from her sitting position. It was an effective way to keep a ninja restrained. She could hardly move and she couldn't use hand seals as her hands were too far apart. Her fingers could only just barely touch each other the way they were at the moment. She looked to one of her shoes and smirked, seeing that they had missed something when they searched her. After that mission to Snow Country, she had asked Naruto how he had gotten out of a cell with that chakra-draining device on his stomach. He had shown her a trick of his, of how he had placed a hidden file in his shoe. Seeing how effective it had been, she had asked him to show her how to modify her shoes for the same reason. The only problem was getting at it. Because of her limited ability to move her arms and that she was in a sitting position, it wouldn't be easy. Hell, most people wouldn't be able to, but thankfully she just might be agile enough for it. She took a few breaths to calm herself as she slowly moved her leg up and then bent it towards her. It wasn't easy getting her foot to her mouth, but she was flexible. Temari managed with her teeth to pull off the small cap where the file was. With her tongue she got the small metal ring and managed to pull it out. Thankfully too, it was starting to hurt to be in that position, and with her arms stretching as they were, it was hard to breathe like this. Now the only problem was getting it to her one of her hands. Thankfully her shoes exposed her toes, and with her large toe and the one next to it, she slowly managed to grip it. It was a lot harder to get it to her hands. The way her body was bending, she couldn't get any air into her lungs, but she pushed on. She felt her joints starting to protest, but when one of her hands felt the small metal piece, she gripped it. Her leg fell back down as she took a much-needed breath. "Thank you, Naruto," she whispered out as she started to make slow progress with the chain on one wrist. She might not be able to get the shackles off, but she could cut them off the chain. Outside Kane's headquarters, Team 7 arrived at the edge of the forest as they looked at the compound. Kakashi took a very long and careful look at the place. He could see armed men walking the perimeter. They were on the ground and on the walls. He was surprised by the place that they had come across it. He hadn't expected something like this out here. He took note of how the guards were stationed. Whoever was organizing this knew a bit about security. The guards always seemed to keep one group in sight of another. There also seemed to be those on the wall that looked at the guards on the ground. If they were counting the groups, that would make things difficult, as taking one group out would alert the guards pretty fast. They needed to plan this out carefully. He had a good idea of what the other team was up to. They were going to use these men to wear them down, making it easier for them to take out Team 7. At least that's what Kakashi would do in their place. You had to fight smarter, not harder. So if he had to play their game, he wasn't going to make it easier for the other side. Sure, the enemy had numbers, but numbers could also be used against you. Then again, Kakashi thought, looking at Naruto. We have an army all our own. I don't think they know our full skills. He could see that Naruto was just barely holding himself from rushing down there and causing all kinds of chaos. But that would be very dangerous, but maybe he could use Naruto's energy for another plan. Everyone, get out your smoke bombs and your paper bombs as well, Kakashi said as he dug into his vest for them. He needed to see what they had to work with, but they should have enough. Seeing what they had, he split half of them and gave them to Naruto. Kakashi-sensei, what do you want me to do with these? Naruto asked him, wondering what he had in mind. It was a lot of explosive power he was holding in his hands. We'll have to wait until dark. He raised a hand to cut off Naruto's protest when he saw it coming. Naruto, we have a better chance at getting to her at dark. We'll use that to our advantage. They won't be able to see that well at night, and also this will be a lot easier to do what you do best. Huh? What I do best? Naruto asked. What's that? Being unpredictable and causing chaos, Kakashi smirked. Sasuke snorted at how accurate that was, mainly the last part. Naruto glared at the Uchiha. Normally he'd yell at what he thought was so funny, but he knew better than to yell while hiding like this. So you want Naruto to use all that as a distraction? Sakura guessed, as Naruto knew how to make a lot of noise and cause pandemonium. Well, not him personally, but his shadow clones will. Kakashi started to explain the plan. Naruto would create a lot of clones and get them in position around the entire compound. They would set off smoke bombs and explosions and harass the guards. This would give the illusion that they would be under attack by a bigger force, plus all of the confusion would make it much simpler to slip into the compound. They would wait until nightfall and then the clones would start the attack. It would also give Kakashi time to see the patrol routes and pick an area that would have the least amount of guards. Everyone understand the plan? Kakashi asked. Everyone nodded as Naruto called up his clones and gave them their orders. He looked to the sky. They only had a couple of hours of sun left. It would be a long wait for him, but he was here and he was going to get Temari out of there. And if they harmed her in any way, he was going to make them pay for it 10 times as much. When night did fall the forest, the guards did their shift change. Out on the wall one of the guards yawned as he made his way to the position. He hated the night shift. It was boring and it was hard to sleep enough during the day. He tried to get put onto the day shift, but the jerk of a boss hated him. This was not the glamorous life of being part of a criminal empire that he imagined. But what was he to do? He stole that money from his temple in his hometown when he left that deadbeat place. Not like he could go back and sweat it out in this old man's shop for the rest of his life. He'd rather die than do that crap. Besides, it was so much easier and more fun taking what you wanted. So he joined up with this group as soon as he could. It wasn't all bad. When they got days off, him and the boys went to the villages and raised hell and visited the good spots in the red light areas of the bigger cities. The other thing he hated about the night shift was that it was boring as hell. You could hardly see anything. The noises in the forests didn't help either. You weren't sure if it was an animal or if someone was out there. It got old and it sucked when it rained. So when he got to his post and everything went dark, he sighed. Another boring night sitting here on the wall. It was only an hour later when the first few explosions happened. Several large explosions in the woods around them happened almost at the same time. Then suddenly a few explosions hitting the walls. Thick smoke was rolling in from several areas. Men were shouting out orders. Alarm bells were ringing. Men were shouting out attacks over the sounds of explosions and then screaming. He had no idea what was going on. Everything was happening so fast. How many were there out there? A man next to him screamed in pain as what looked like a shuriken was embedded into his arm. A kunai hit a spot further away as the explosive tag on it went off. Parts of the stone walls were blasted away as the chunks flew off, hitting the others who were standing too close. The rocks were like little missiles as they hit the unfortunately men. It was pure chaos as those in charge tried to establish some order. Groups were sent into the forest to find and kill the attackers, while archers were called up to the walls. By that time it getting hard to see, smoke from small fires mixed in with that from smoke bombs. Some areas men couldn't see what was happening and were panicking. While all this happened, Team 7 silently made their way to one of the walls. It was one of the less defended areas, as many of the guards there had left to reinforce the walls being attacked. They ran silently as they quickly ran straight up the walls. These weren't built with ninja in mind. These walls were built to keep out bandits or enemy forces. To a ninja, these walls were just a small hurdle to get over and wouldn't slow them down much. When they reached the top, only 3 guards were there, with a surprised look on their faces as 4 people jumped over the wall. They didn't even get a chance to shout out a warning before they were taken out. Kakashi looked over the area. He saw 2 main entrances and he figured that anyone being held prisoner would be in the most hard to get to place. It would either a tower or a dungeon by his experience. He nodded to Sakura and Sasuke. They had planned this out earlier, that they would split into 2 groups. They would find Temari and then deal with Kane. If they found any enemy ninja, they were to avoid them if possible, especially if they were outnumbered. As the 2 groups left, they never once noticed another shadowy figure go up the wall behind them. The form looked around and then started to follow one of the 2 groups. With all the chaos around them, it was easy to follow without being noticed. Chapter 27. Breakout. The entire complex was up in an uproar. There were explosions all about. Fires were starting in several areas, men shouting out orders. It was pure chaos and it was the perfect cover for a group of ninja to infiltrate the complex. Sasuke and Sakura made good time as they traveled the hallway they entered. They did come across the occasional guards, but low-grade criminals were no match for ninja. Even a genin knew more about fighting than the average criminal, as ninja trained to fight and kill as children. Sakura was keeping up, but she could tell that Sasuke was rushing things. Although she wanted to hope it was to find Temari. Sakura herself wanted to find the older girl quickly, although it had been only a short time since Temari had been placed on their team. Sakura looked up to the older girl. Sakura really didn't have anyone to look up to as a female ninja, there weren't many that she even knew. But Temari was everything that Sakura wished she could be: strong, powerful and full of confidence. Since training with the older girl, Sakura had felt that she had become stronger but still had a long way to go. Also, Temari was someone that Sakura considered not only a comrade but a friend. There was no way she was going to let a friend behind either. Sasuke, however, was keeping an eye out for the enemy ninja. Although he was told not to engage if possible, if there was no other way to fight, then there didn't seem to be an issue with him. Plus he got the feeling that his group might be a strong group. It took both Naruto and Temari to defeat one of them, and in response both were defeated by another. To him that said that this group had to be strong and it was only fighting strong opponents that Sasuke could see where he was. He needed to test his strength and power, he needed to see how far he had come and how much farther he needed to go. He needed power to kill Itachi, as he was now he knew that he couldn't do it. He was still too weak, but he wouldn't be weak forever. One day he would catch up to his brother and make him pay for killing their clan, their family. For turning his world to ash and darkness, he would ensure that Itachi paid tenfold for every agonizing day that Sasuke had to live since that day. They soon found themselves into a large room. It looked to have been once been a meeting room of some kind, only converted into some kind of room for the people that worked here. There were tables that looked out of place, like they were from some other room. Cups and dishes were still on the table. It looked like the guards used this to eat as well as relax. There were countless playing cards and dices. The place smelled of tobacco and alcohol, but there was oddly very little light around the area. The lamps were mostly blown out and heavy shadows filled the room. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and Sasuke could feel the hairs on the back of his neck sticking up. Every instinct he had was telling him that someone was in here with them. Sakura, get out of here as fast as you can. Sasuke told her, scanning the room. What? But we're told to stick together. She protested. Damn it, get out of here now, hurry and find Temari. He yelled at her, thinking he saw movement in one of the shadows. He activated his eyes and got into a fighting stance. Sakura knew what was going on as she pulled a kunai. I'm not leaving you. Sasuke hissed out in annoyance. Will you just go? You're no help to me here. I'll hold this one off, but in case Naruto and Kakashi are busy, then who will save Temari? He figured using that would get the girl moving. He could see her hesitating. Look, you're not strong enough to help me with this, you'll only be in the way, so get going. He didn't see just how hurt she was from his words. She had been trying so hard to get stronger, but it seemed it wasn't enough. He didn't recognize her as strong, and she felt crushed that his view of her hadn't changed at all. A part of her wanted to stay and fight and show him that she wasn't as weak as she had been. But there was always that part of her mind, that part that was the little girl that had been bullied and would always have doubts about herself. The part that always said she wasn't good enough or strong enough, and after hearing his words, that part of her mind was louder than it had been in a while. Are you sure? She asked him softly. Yes, now go before it's too late. He said without hesitation. Sakura didn't want to leave him, but he had a point. They needed to save Temari. But she didn't want to leave her teammate behind either. She knew that for a ninja the mission came first, but didn't Kakashi tell them that those that abandon their allies are worse than trash? She didn't have to make the final choice, however, when a shadowy figure came out of the darkness and attacked her. Sakura jumped back as her back was close to one of the doors that led out of the room. The figure looked like a cloak-wearing person with white and red face paint. She couldn't make out much more than that. But she also didn't have time to. The figure fired several kunai at her, nearly missing her. Sakura, get Temari and then come back. I'll hold this one off now, get going. Sasuke said angrily as he used a fire jutsu to try and burn the ninja from behind. Sakura saw it coming and had to run through the door and immediately turned and hid behind the wall. She saw the flames and felt the heat from the attack. She was about to see if he was okay, but the door suddenly slammed shut. Sakura was surprised. She went to try and open it, but it was a thick door and it seemed to be sealed shut. Sasuke, however, was already looking to see if the ninja escaped or not. He didn't think that they had time to use a substitution jutsu, but you could never be too careful. The flames were still there, slowly dying, but nothing else was seen, except for a burnt-out cloak. He felt a rush of air and quickly dodged to the side to avoid the woman attacking him from behind. He leaned back to avoid a blade coming out of the dark cloak, nearly decapitating him. He threw a kunai through the cloak and it should have hit the body. But instead it seemed to pass through it. She quickly went into the shadows and then appeared out of the opposite end of the room. That black cloak and dark hair made sure she blended into the darkness really well. She seemed to glide forward towards him. He got ready with another kunai as 3 more forms came out from opposite ends of the room, to his left and right. He had to fight 3 of these phantoms at once. They moved quickly and he felt a cut form on an arm. It wasn't deep and it would sting later, but he could ignore it. The thing was, they felt off. The blows didn't feel normal, and when he kicked in, it was like there was nothing there. Finally he managed to get out of the way and got some breathing space. The figures seemed to move back and merge back into the shadows. How does it feel, little boy? Do you like my genjutsu? Genjutsu. Sasuke repeated as he looked around. That didn't make sense. His eyes should be able to see through any and all genjutsu. How could she use one? Plus he couldn't see their movements like with a normal person, so they weren't people with the same look. Something was off here, and he wasn't sure what. That's right, my genjutsu allows me to attack you, but you can't attack me. The ninja Yoko said to him. She started to attack again as more and more versions of her seemed to come out of the darkness. Sasuke fought on, trying to keep ahead of her. It wasn't easy. He could only make out attacks just as they were coming, but he couldn't see past this genjutsu of hers, which should be impossible. As he fought on, he realized that she was starting to wear him down. Then a strange thing happened. Music filled the air, and not just any music either. Someone was playing a flute by the sounds of it. What the hell? Who's there? Yoko demanded to the darkness. A young woman's laughter was heard as the music stopped. And here I thought the great Uchiha would have seen through your trick, said the voice echoing off the walls. Haven't you seen past her trick yet, you moron? Here's a tip. She's not using genjutsu at all. What? Sasuke looked again at the figures. They all looked the same, but it was true that a genjutsu he should have seen through. But the woman kept insisting it was a genjutsu, which meant that she was lying the entire time. Sasuke felt like kicking himself for letting himself fall for one of the ninja basic fundamentals, deception. So the question was, besides who the hell was in here with him, was how this woman was doing it. Oh come on, it's easy once you think it through. Shut the hell up, demanded Yoko into the darkness. She didn't like anyone pointing out how her trick worked. Bite me, you bitch. What did you say? Yoko yelled out, getting distracted. Sasuke took advantage of this distraction and threw out half a dozen shuriken. Although they weren't normal ones, these had ninja wire attached to them. They flew over the area, some going through the figures while others went close to them. Yoko wasn't sure what he was up to as one of her forms had to dodge one of the deadly little blades. Sasuke grinned. That was the one he wanted. With his one hand he put the ends of the wires into his mouth and used a flame jutsu. The flame traveled with the wires. One wire had at least pierced the chest of one of the illusions, but he knew these weren't illusions. The flames spread out in a web, making it nearly impossible to avoid. The figures went up in flames as only one of them cried out in pain. She held her arm as she had been burned by the flames. What he saw was that the heads were puppets with slim skeletal structure. That's why they moved so fast. They hardly had any weight to them. Plus, with so little to hit under the cloaks, it would be easy to miss the actual body parts. So looks like you did figure out her little trick, came the female voice again. I do have to admit, using puppets to pose as a genjutsu is a nice little trick you got there. I hope that you at least have a backup, because that boy will kill you otherwise. Whose side are you on? Yoko screamed as she threw away her cloak. She saw that half of her puppets were useless and she couldn't use her burnt arm. I'm on my side, the girl returned. I don't care if you live or die. I'm only here to make sure he doesn't die and the rest, well, it's not your fucking business anyway. Yoko cursed the girl out as she called her remaining puppets. They detached apart, each one having the disguise fall away, leaving the wooden true forms appear. They seemed to attach themselves to Yoko, almost like body armor against her body. Blades stuck out in key places as her entire body was covered. I'm going to kill you. After I kill him, Yoko said, taking a step forward. Now that I'm not going to be subtle, I can use my puppet armor. The armor is thick enough to take a lot of punishment, boy, and if you think this makes me slow, think again. She moved at Sasuke with incredible speed. He couldn't avoid the kick as it sent him flying off into a few tables. Yoko laughed even though she was in pain. The downside to this jutsu was that using the enhanced speed and strength. She was using her puppet skills to move the armor itself at the speed. Her body was just going along for the ride, but the strain it put on her body was hard. Too much, and she could injure herself even more. Face it, you're not strong enough to beat me, boy. Yoko laughed, but then the tables seemed to explode outward. There stood the boy, but with strange black markings covering half his body. The sound of birds chirping could be heard as Sasuke had a chidori ready for her. She would have to take the hit and then counter-attack with her fist. Given that with the armor her fists could hit like sledgehammers, one good hit to the head and that's all she needed. Unfortunately, she didn't know that the chidori was an assassination technique, designed to pierce through practically anything. Sasuke ran forward and then ran her through. She gave a surprised outcry before her voice was cut off. She tried to move, but her body refused to. Sasuke pulled his bloody hand out of her chest, leaving her to fall to the floor dead. He stood there catching his breath as he heard clapping. He looked to see a girl, about his own age with red hair, walking towards him. Well, I hate to admit when I'm wrong, but you actually might not be totally worthless after all. Who are you? Sasuke demanded. Someone that can teach you more about the curse seal, she answered as black markings of her own showed up on her body. You're doing well, Dufar, but you have only just scratched the surface. There is a lot more power in it than you know. You're with Orochimaru. Sasuke stated, fitting it all into place. You're the one that was following me earlier in town, weren't you? She paused for a moment, caught off guard by that. She thought she had been pretty good to not let him see her. Well, yes, that was me. Tell me, do you truly want real power? Because I can help. I can show you everything I know about that seal and then some. I was sent to offer you a choice. You can learn to do this on your own, or I can teach you things you'll never know on your own. What's the catch? Sasuke asked, knowing that Orochimaru wanted him. I'm only to show you what's possible under Orochimaru-sama. If you want more power, then I'll lead you to him. But that means you have to leave the village. If you're happy being compared to that orange-wearing idiot, fine by me. At the rate he's going to surpass you. Tayuya smirked, seeing the dark shadow that seemed to come over Sasuke's eyes. So, what do you say? Tayuya asked him. Lower cells. Temari heard the sounds of battle outside her cell. She knew that her team would come, but she had to work harder to get out of the cell. It had taken a good half an hour to cut her hands free. Although she still had manacles on her wrists, at least she wasn't chained to the wall anymore. Thankfully, they hadn't chained her feet together. Now she just had to pick the lock of her cell. This time it was something she had picked up. She reached into her hair and pulled out a couple of hidden metal picks she kept there. If people only knew the kinds of things she could hid in her hair like that. After all, a ninja made full use of everything, even their appearance usually had some meaning or reasoning behind it. She was already working on trying to pick the lock. She had tried for the shackles on her wrists, but if the metal broke, she would be screwed. So first the door. Although it wasn't easy, she had only done this enough times to get the basic idea out of it. She hadn't kept up the practice or learned about more complicated locks. That was something she would look into after this. If this ever happened again, she vowed to be more prepared. She was just lucky they hadn't searched her hair or taken her shoes. Hell, sometimes a prisoner would be stripped naked to ensure nothing was hidden on their bodies. Thankfully, that hadn't happened. Only her husband would ever get that privilege. A bang of worry hit her. was Naruto alright? He had taken a large hit, and although she had faith in him, she was still worried. Temari shook her head and berated herself for doubting him. She told herself that she would get out of here and see him again. She went back to work, and finally, after a lot of effort and swearing, she managed to get it open. So now she was free. Now she needed to find her fan, her equipment if possible, and meet up with the others while avoiding detection. Sounded like a challenge to her. She grinned at that thought. She did so love a challenge. Courtyard. Kakashi and Naruto were taking a shortcut over open ground. Sure, it was risky, but with everyone attention looking outside, it made it easier. They were heading towards the main building. The courtyard was mostly grass with a stone path. There were a few decorative statues, but nothing worth noticing. A few low hedges and just the usual stuff you'd expect in one of these places. Although when they got near the door, they found that it was already someone waiting for them. There in the doorway, with 2 torches on either side for light, was standing a huge man with a cape and a nasty-looking weapon. Kakashi saw that the weapon was a kanabo, a large 8-sided club made from solid oak with metal studs all over the sides. It was a heavy but brutal weapon, something that would shatter bones and organs with a single hit. And given the size of the man and the force that could be used behind it, Kakashi was going to have to make sure to keep his distance. Kakashi threw several smoke bombs quickly to give Naruto some cover. The large man swung his weapon in an arc through the smoke. He felt a few hits, which was odd since there were only 2 of them. That is until a few Naruto clones came out and grabbed the man. The real Naruto jumped up high, stepping on the man's head and using that to spring himself over and through the doorway. Guro easily managed to get the clones off him as they dispelled. At least Guro had an idea as to why there were so many attackers, but all of those from just one boy. He didn't think that was possible. If it was, then the boy's chakra would be higher than most ninja in the entire world. But regardless, he would have to get the boy later if the rest of his team didn't. Now he had to deal with Kakashi first. That man was the most dangerous out of the group. Guro calmly waited for the first move. As the smoke cleared, he saw a few shuriken being thrown at him. Most likely thinking that would work, but there was something that Kakashi didn't know. Guro swung his weapon as easily as though it weighed nothing, smashing the small metal objects. He saw that Kakashi was finishing up a jutsu of his own, as those had just been a distraction. Well, Guro had a surprise for him. He dropped his weapon as he started his own hand seals. Thankfully, he could do this jutsu in his sleep. Kakashi let loose a large blast of fire. He knew it would be seen from the walls, but battling this man would get anyone's attention anyway. So it would be best to end this quickly, as he could and then get inside out of the line of sight before that happened. The flame enveloped a wide area. There wasn't much in the way of getting away from that kind of attack. As the flames died down, he was surprised by what he saw. There was now a large wall of red-hot rock protecting the ninja. For a moment nothing happened, and then Kakashi felt a small tremor in the ground. He knew this jutsu that was about to happen. With only a split second to get himself saved, he jumped out of the way. He just managed to make it when a large hand came out of the ground, just missing his foot. Soon the large man erupted out of the ground and swung his massive weapon at Kakashi. The large weapon passed by so close that he could feel the wind as it passed by his face as he dodged it. Not bad, but let's see you dodge this, Guro said as he thrust the top of his weapon into the ground. Suddenly a dozen sharp sword-like objects, that were made from the earth itself, came from the ground. Kakashi guessed that the weapon could be used to make earth-type jutsus like how Temari used her fans. But this created more and more of these earth blades from the ground. Kakashi had to keep moving or else suffer being impaled. Already he felt 2 of the blades cut into him. One grazed his thigh. Thankfully it didn't get a clean hit, but the one that got an arm had been better. He gritted his teeth, feeling the sharp stone and earth cut into the flesh of his left arm. He needed to end this a lot quicker if he wanted to survive. Already he could hear shouts from the walls as the guards were noticing what was going on. Guro grinned to himself. His earth spires were a very nasty jutsu when you were stuck on the ground. That's why he picked this wide open space. There was no high ground to escape. He saw Kakashi moving through the gaps, and he was injured. With his weapon he smashed through his rock spires as he made his way to Kakashi. He jumped on top of a flat edge to gain some height. Guro had managed to get just the right angle as he came down on top of Kakashi. The masked Konoha ninja only had time to turn and face him before the weapon crushed in his skull. Or at least that was what was supposed to happen. Instead, Kakashi turned into smoke, and it was only then that he realized his mistake. He had lost sight of Kakashi long enough for the man to make a shadow clone. It was then he felt the cold steel on his neck. Guro chuckled a bit. Damn, I never even heard you coming up behind me. You really are deserving of your reputation. Last requests? Kakashi asked. He didn't normally give them, but this guy had surprised him with that jutsu. He was glad to have copied it. It might come in handy later on. Just tell them that Guro of the Broken Earth died well. He simply stated before Kakashi cut this throat. It didn't last long as Kakashi quickly turned the kunai and plunged it into the base of the neck. Making sure to kill him as quickly as possible, there was no need to prolong death in such a way. He could only hope someone showed him the same mercy if his time came. Naruto. Naruto had no idea where he was going. Any enemies he came across he just beat up and left behind him. He sent out a few clones in other directions to show him where things were, but all this use of clones was starting to put a strain on him. The clones outside attacking were at half strength. The enemies had been attacking his clones with whatever they could find. Granted, most of the criminals had been beaten, but Naruto was starting to feel it. He hadn't really used this many shadow clones for this amount of time. Normally he used a lot for short periods or a small number for long periods. All the stuff they had been doing was catching up to him. Looking around the place, it all seemed the same to him. The same wooden floors, the same red pillars with gold trim. Nothing really stood out, and he was just taking one turn into another. He finally seemed to have found his way into some central area. There were some large stone statues of some kind of figures. He didn't know who they were supposed to be. Then again, if it wasn't about ninja in school, he never did pay much attention. There were two stairwells next to each other going up, and a gap between them going down. It looked like some kind of large meeting hall of something. So now he had a choice, to go up and down. Kakashi said that they might have dungeons, so maybe down was the best route. If not, he could always come back and then take the other way up. He was just about to run to the stairs leading down when a huge gust of wind hit him. He flew back, slamming into one of the statues. Damn, you're still alive, Kimi said as she had been hidden behind one of the large statues waiting. I'd have thought that those trees would have killed you. Buddha or Kami must smile upon idiots and fools, that is if you believe in that kind of stuff. Where's Temari-chan? Naruto said as he struggled to get up. His back hurt, but he had been hit a lot worse than. He could feel the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. Most likely he got a cut lip from his teeth or something. Oh, so it's Temari-chan, huh? So you two are together that way? Kimi stated as she slowly moved forward with her own fan. What if I said she was already dead? You're lying. She's not dead. Naruto shouted out at her. Then I guess you'll have to see for yourself, that is if you think you can beat me. Kimi stated as she got into a fighting pose. Chapter 28. Settling Matters. Naruto was staring down the female ninja in front of him. This was the one that had most likely blown him into the trees earlier. She had a fan just like Temari's, only in a different style. He didn't know where Temari was, but this girl obviously knew, and he would make her tell him what she knew. He charged forward, making several clones as he ran at her. She smirked. She couldn't believe he would do something so careless. Was the boy an idiot or just had a death wish? She opened her fan and used it to make a large wind, blowing him and his clones away. The clones disappeared when they hit the ground, but Naruto slowly got up. He wouldn't give up, and he would make her tell him the truth. He threw one of the few kunai he had left, knowing she would use her fan to get rid of them. When she drew back her fan, he went off at an angle. Now she would have to deal with the kunai or get hit by them, while she had to focus on that he would attack her on a totally different approach. She did use the wind to knock the weapons away, but with her backhand she managed to use her fan one more time. This time Naruto was thrown back into one of the large statues before hitting the ground. Well, that was better, Kimi stated as she rested her fan on the ground and leaned on it. But in order to beat a wind user, you can't come at us so directly and you have to be fast. In a one-on-one fight, you can't beat someone like me. I won't give up, Naruto said through gritted teeth as he pushed himself up. Huh, that should have broken at least one bone. Kimi looked at the boy. He should be hurting more than just that, either she was losing her touch or the kid was tougher than normal. Then again, he did survive being buried under some trees. She opened her fan ready to finish him off when she sensed someone coming up fast behind her. Kimi managed to dodge just as Temari's kick flew past her head. Kimi turned to get her fan in use, but in close quarters it wasn't easy. Temari-chan. Naruto yelled out, seeing her. Leave this to me, Naruto. This is personal, Temari told him, not looking at him as she wanted to keep her eyes focused on her opponent. She knew that she couldn't let Kimi get any distance. Temari hadn't found her fan, so she was at a major disadvantage. Sure, with Team 7 she had been learning some combat without the fan, but it was still her preferred mode of fighting. She kept at the older woman, never letting her get any distance or time to use any technique. But she was having a hard time landing a hit on the girl too. Kimi had closed her fan and was now using it as a defensive barrier. Hitting the metal fan was like hitting a wall. She once tried for a sidekick and Kimi had placed the fan in her way. Now Temari's shin hurt like hell. She was lucky she pulled at the last moment, or else she might have broken it. Kimi kept on jumping away, trying to get the distance, but Temari was right on her tail the entire time. You've improved, Kimi noted as they fought. But you still don't know everything I taught you. Kimi opened her ran, but instead of waving it around sideways, she spun it around vertically in a circle. Temari was caught by surprise when a wind shield was created. But she had her own surprise. You never taught me everything. Temari bit her thumb to draw out blood. Normally she would use another means to call on him, but thankfully there were many different ways to call forth a summon animal. She called forth Kamatari, the one-eyed weasel that carried a sickle with him. Go Kamatari. On it, the weasel stated as he flew with tremendous speed at Kimi. The summon animal could move so quickly that most people couldn't follow him. But with Kimi's wind shield, all his strikes ended up hitting her barrier. That was fine, she planned on it to get some breathing room anyway. Now she just needed a plan of attack before Kamatari went back. She could only summon him in battle for short bursts. Naruto had watched the battle, and although he wanted to know what was going on with them, they seemed to know one another. The girl had said something about training Temari, and she was using a fan just like his wife. Was the girl from Suna? He also wished he could help, but Temari seemed really serious about fighting her alone. But she didn't have any weapons. Then he remembered what he found on the way here. He dug into his equipment bag and pulled out the two small battle fans. She said he couldn't help, but nothing said he couldn't at least give her back what was hers. Temari-chan. Here. He threw them at her. She caught the items as they were thrown at her. At first she wasn't sure what he was doing and about to chew him out when she saw what they were. The fans he had given her as a gift. She had thought that they had taken them when she woke up, but they must have fallen off her. She smiled as Kimi would never expect this. She quickly ran at the other girl as she saw her summon animal leaving. Well, that was a new trick, Kimi said as she pulled her own fan back. But you never were able to beat me, Temari. It's time to end this. I would have preferred to kill your brother, but I suppose we never get what we want. Kimi sent out a blade of air at Temari, trying to cut her in half. Temari quickly opened her fans and in a crisscross fashion created two smaller versions of the same air blade. Although Kimi's was larger, Temari's were more accurate and cut a hole for her passage through them. Normally her larger fan would have just cancelled out the other jutsu. This way the air blade was now cut into two as it cut two paths of destruction behind her. Kimi was surprised by this as she tried to get her fan back into position for another shot. Temari was faster though. She managed to duck under the large fan and with one swipe, cut into Kimi's stomach with the fan in her hand. Kimi dropped her fan as she held her stomach. She hadn't expected Temari to know a new style of fan battling. She had to admit, Temari had grown a lot since she last saw her. In a strange way she was kind of proud of that. She winced as the pain made her fall to her knees. The feel of her hot blood was covering her hands. She knew that if she pulled her hands away, her guts would spill out. She was basically dead, it only would be a matter of time now. She could die slowly as her body bled out, or she could die in a short and horrible manner seeing her guts spill out onto the floor. Temari stepped forward, knowing full well the kind of damage she had just inflicted on the older girl. Kimmy wouldn't be able to use the fan against her again, not without killing herself in trying. She felt a pain deep in her heart at the sight of this. This was something she never wanted in her life. Well, you've gotten stronger. Kimmy coughed up blood that most likely was seeping into her stomach and one lung from a small cut she bet. Do me one favor, even if for old time's sake. What? Temari asked, trying to keep her voice from cracking in seeing this. Kimmy lifted her head to look at Temari without any fear. End this, please. I don't want this to drag out. Please send me to him. I want to see him again so bad. Kimmy said as the first tears she had shed in a year finally showed on her face. Temari placed the fans on either side of her neck. Where's my fan? Second floor. Store room in the east side, you can't miss it. Kimmy said to her. I'm sorry, Temari said as her hands shook. For everything. Doesn't matter, Kimmy said as she closed her eyes and thought of her dead lover again. Shisa hoped she would finally be united with him again. Temari shut her eyes and gritted her teeth as she slid the fans in a crisscross pattern and put some chakra into them. They created 2 wind cuts that decapitated the ex-Suna ninja. Temari heard the head hit and then the body. She felt the spray of blood hit her body and she slowly forced herself to look. There laying on the ground was someone that had shaped her life. Her head and body separate, there was so much blood as the girl's heart bumped out a few more times before stopping. It was a sickening sight and one she knew would never left her. Temari-chan. Naruto said, slightly worried as he touched her arm. I need to get my fan, Temari said as she moved. She didn't look back, she didn't let any emotion onto her face. Which was just as well, at the moment she felt too numb to feel or say anything. When everyone gathered together again, they met up in one of the main rooms. Kakashi had found Sakura and made their way together. They had found Naruto and Temari, who by that time had found her fan. Soon after that they finally met up with Sasuke. When asked what happened, he just shrugged, saying he had to deal with the ninja he had been trapped with. He didn't elaborate, only that he just had to find another route as he couldn't have broken down the door that had been locked shut. The place was starting to get more and more crowded as Naruto's shadow clone army was starting to dwindle. They needed to come up with a plan on dealing with everything. So, any bright ideas? Sasuke asked as they looked around. We need to deal with this Kane person, Sakura said as she thought about it. Without him, these guys won't be much of a problem. I think we should burn this place down as well, Kakashi stated, seeing the surprised looks. Well, it would cover our escape as well as prevent anyone else from using this place as a base. It would scatter the men and prevent this place being used again by them or others like them. Kakashi looked at his genin. Naruto, Sasuke, can I trust you two to set this up? He figured between Sasuke's fire jutsus and Naruto's natural ability to wreak havoc and destroy things, they could easily make this place a smoldering ruins in a few hours. Sure. But where are you going, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked him. To take care of a loose end, Kakashi said cryptically as he went on his way. Kane was in his room waiting for an update on what was going on. The sounds of battle had slowly been fading over time. For now he needed to know what the status was. A few men had come up and told him a few things, that there were fighting inside the compound, but after that nothing else. He hadn't heard back from those ninja either. He wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. He looked out the large window that was behind his desk. So far the fighting seemed to be dying down. There weren't any more explosions, at least. He didn't want to think about the repairs. He just hoped that girl was worth enough to cover it. Interesting office, an unfamiliar voice said behind him. I should have known it would have been at the highest point of the building. Kane turned around quickly, but there was no one there, but then again there was a lot of darkness. He had turned out most of the lights so no one would see him at the window. Being killed while he was looking out at the battle would have been a bad move on his point simply because the light was giving his profile away at the window. He slowly edged towards his desk for the blade he kept there. You have me at a disadvantage, Kane said, looking for any kind of movement. It seems I have an uninvited guest. You wouldn't happen to let me know who you are and what happened to the ninja I hired, would you? The name you don't need to know, as I don't think you're worth it. As for the ninja, well. Suddenly a presence was felt behind him as Kane felt a cold blade enter his back. He choked out a sound as he tried to look behind him. He never heard a thing, never even knew the man was behind him until it was too late. Kakashi leaned in and gently said to him, "As for the ninja, you'll be seeing them." He reached with his other hand and quickly snapped the man's neck. He let him fall to the floor and left. The place would soon be on fire and he didn't want to be here when it did. Later, when they returned from their mission, all of village had been waiting to see them. Once again they were given a hero's welcome. When word got around that the threat was gone, people wanted to thank them all personally. But after a long mission they really needed to get to rest. So with some thanks to all the people, they moved to their rooms in the hotel eager for a rest. They were all tired and sporting some injuries as well that they needed to see to tending. For Kakashi, he threw his vest down as he got out the injury kit he kept in one of his sealed scrolls. They had put a minimum amount of time on their injuries back before they left to come back to the village, but now it was time to get a better look at them. So far as missions went, it hadn't been too bad. Sure, they had some problems, but all missions do. No one needed to go to the hospital and they had accomplished all their goals. He doubted the survivors of that criminal organization would attack the village anymore. Not without their leader or the ninja. The people of the village could defend themselves against common criminals now. He started with fixing up his injuries. It was times like this a medic would come in handy. He only knew the basic field medic training that Anbu needed to know. As sometimes you had to do solo missions, and if you got hurt, well, you were pretty much screwed if you didn't know how to treat yourself well enough to get to safety. But thinking about the mission, he couldn't help but think something was going on that he didn't know about. Temari looked very distracted and Naruto seemed concerned, and not for her physical injury. Someone had happened and she wasn't talking about it. Naruto could look after that, but he would have to keep an eye on her if things got worse. She was obviously dealing with something. Then there was Sasuke. He was in deep thought as well, but it seemed more like he was trying to make up his mind about something. The only one he really didn't have to worry as much about was Sakura. She did seem a little down when she looked at Sasuke, but other than that she was doing well. This was why he didn't like to teach young kids. They weren't mature enough to handle some things and he had no experience in dealing with kids. It was part of the reason he always failed the previous genin teams. Well, that and they had no teamwork at all, and this way he could have more time to himself. But with Team 7 he thought that maybe he saw some hope that he had found the perfect team. Well, he should have known that no one was perfect, he mused with a chuckle. Hell, more often than not, he was brought back to his own genin team under Yellow Flash. But it seemed that the bond of Team 7 had been shaky lately. Temari had helped. She had formed bonds with Naruto and Sakura, but Sasuke still remained the problem. After finishing his first aid and laid down on his futon with a sigh, he stared up the ceiling wondering what he could do to help things out. Maybe he should ask Asuma and Kurenai. They at least had teams that seemed to work well with each other. He could ask Guy, but he dismissed that. Just because if he ever asked Guy for anything the man would hold that over his head for years and it just wasn't worth it. Thinking of home brought his mind to Anko. Maybe she could have a talk with Sasuke. He might actually listen to her as she was given a curse seal as well. Maybe they could find something in common and she could warn him about the path he was walking down. It was a long shot, but it couldn't hurt. In fact, he felt that was a good idea. He'd go and see her and ask her. Thinking of the purple-haired woman brought this thoughts to this little, friends with benefits thing they had going. Besides the fact that the sex was great and she was fun to hang out with, he was thinking of her more often. It was really odd, he never had a woman brought to his mind so much. Was it just lust they had with each other, or could there be something more? Or maybe it was just him. After all, he had never really had a real relationship. Maybe he was just catching up with his age, but he was only just 26. Then again, in the ninja world that could be considered middle age, that was a laugh, him having a midlife crisis already. Maybe Anko just wanted to have someone that she could have fun and stress relief with. After all, she was a younger woman of 24, she had time to just play around before she felt the need to commit to anything he bet. He sighed again, he wouldn't think about it for now. Right now he just wanted to sleep and then face any problems in the morning. In the Temari and Naruto Uzumaki room, it was pretty silent. Naruto, being mostly healed up, only needed some bandages, a few were just for show for the others too. Temari needed help though, as her ribs were sore as was her arms. Naruto helped with putting bandages on her exposed torso. He couldn't help but blush as he did so, but he noticed her eyes had that faraway look in them. Sorry you had to do that, Naruto said, knowing what she was most likely thinking about. It's okay. It happens, Temari said in a neutral voice. One day's friend could be tomorrow's enemy. No, it's not okay, Naruto said sternly as his raised voice actually got her full attention. She had rarely heard him with that tone of voice to her. You two knew each other. I don't know the full story, but I could tell that you two were friends. It doesn't matter. It's all in the past. Temari shouted as she turned away from him. She felt the stinging in her eyes from tears. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want to have anyone see her cry. She hated to be seen as weak, and she wouldn't do that now. It should matter, Naruto said to her as he placed a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged it off, not wanting him to feel sorry for her. You don't know what it's like to kill a friend anyway. Temari said the words without thinking them, she just wanted to lash out. She had lost one of the most important people in her life not once but twice. And this time she had killed her. She could still see the bloody corpse she had turned Kimi into. Every time she closed her eyes she could see that image. There was a silence for a moment until Naruto spoke softly. There was a boy, his name was Haku. When I first met him I thought he was a girl actually, but he helped me. He told me that to truly be strong, you need someone precious to protect. He gave me something that I hold on to. It's one of my most important rules I live by. Then the next time we saw each other, he was trying to kill me and Sasuke. Temari turned slowly to face him and she saw the sadness in his eyes as he remembered that day. I never blamed him, he was just trying to protect his most precious person. I nearly did kill him too. I wanted to kill him, but when I saw his eyes I just couldn't. He was a lot like me too, I considered him a friend. But in the end he sacrificed himself to protect a ninja that Kakashi was going to kill. I know that it was Kakashi that did the killing blow, but I still think I could have stopped him. I could have done something, grabbed him, but I didn't. Sometimes I still think that I didn't stop him on purpose. That a part of me was still angry that I thought at the time he had killed Sasuke. Naruto shook his head at that. Still, he was a good person really, and I think of him as a friend. Even though I just met him, but in the end my team killed him just because we were on separate sides. But I still hold on to what he taught me. He finished. He hadn't noticed she had moved until she was holding on to him. She was holding on tightly, more for herself than anything else, so he gently held her back. How do I go on? How do I live with this? She asked, nearly choking on the tears she was holding back. She was like an older sister to me, and she made a choice too. She tried to kill you, Naruto said, trying to think of something that could ease her pain. Just remember what she was like, remember the good times. Remember her as she was. That's how I like to remember Haku, as the person I met in that field and not as my enemy who died. Temari couldn't take it anymore. All the pain she had been pushing down, she just couldn't do it anymore. She broke down as she started to cry into his shoulder. The pain of losing Kimi again, of learning the truth, of killing her and everything else, as it was just too much. She needed something to hold onto, and Naruto was perfect. He let her cry her heart out to him, letting his presence help her deal with the pain. Sometime later, Team 7 finally made it home without any trouble. Temari had been very quiet on the way home, but no one pushed her. She was always by Naruto's side, almost like she was taking strength in just his presence. Sasuke was quiet as well, and so it was left to Naruto and Sakura to try and keep things interesting as they made their way back. The two tried to lighten the mood, but it wasn't easy. By the time they reached the massive gates of the village, Kakashi could literally feel the sigh with his team. It had been a long mission and everyone would be tired. Why don't you all go home? I'll handle the mission report, Kakashi told them. His charges made their way home and Kakashi sighed, not sure if he could deal with this. He wasn't good with dealing with the emotions of one so young. He might have to deal with this if things didn't improve. At least with Temari, she had Naruto who seemed to be helping her with something. Sasuke was just a mystery. He was walling himself up and not letting anyone even close. With Naruto and Temari, he was watching his young wife carefully. She hadn't said much after that night. She broke down crying. He figured she was just coming to terms with everything. She had told him everything about Kimi, how she had been the one that Temari had looked up to and trained her in the use of the fan. How things had gone when Gaara had killed her lover while he had been in some kind of battle lust. She went straight to the shower and changed. He felt like the same and used the smaller one downstairs in their home. When he came out, he looked over the place. It had started to take on a feel of a real home lately. Here and there were touches of both himself and her. There were a few pictures hanging on the living room wall, of Team 7 and others. There was a picture of Temari and her old team and family. He also saw a present he made for her once. He had taken her old Suna headband and put it into a glass case and placed it on the wall. When she had seen it and asked him why he did it, he just said that she should be proud of where she came from. So that she would never forget and that everyone would know she was proud of her Suna heritage. She had given him a beautiful smile and pulled him into a kiss for that. Apparently he had made a good choice in that. He had changed in the small bathroom after taking the clothes with him for his shower. He dropped his dirty clothing in the hamper, knowing if he didn't she would get angry with him. He finished drying his hair and placed it in there as well. Naruto made it up to the second floor. His old room before the marriage was pretty much turned into a spare room now. Since he now slept in the same bed as Temari after their wedding. At first it took some getting used to, but he grew to really like it. He stepped into their room and saw that she already had a nightgown on and slipped inside the bed. She was turned away from him and he paused, wondering if she wanted to be alone. Please stay. Temari told him almost like she could tell what his hesitation was about. Naruto wordlessly slipped into bed with her as she turned and hugged herself to his body. She didn't cry, but she did need to have some kind of comfort. She felt a little weak at doing this, but she didn't care anymore about appearances. Besides, as long as it was Naruto, she didn't care what he saw. For him, she could afford to look weak because he would never judge her, only love her. It was that feeling of love that she needed the most in this moment. It would take time for this opened wound to heal over again, but as long as she had her husband, she knew that the healing process would be better this time around. Sasuke finally made it home and the place was quiet as usual, which he didn't mind. Sometimes he preferred the quiet. There were no distractions or anything else. No one to pressure him or fangirls to annoy him. No more people with pity in their eyes that looked at him or anything else like that. Here was a place where no one would bother him, and he was surrounded by the memories of what he had to do with his life. He had to make these halls full again one day while ensuring that no one was left to harm them. To avenge the blood that had been spilled here. He kicked his shoes off and went to his room. He placed his backpack on the floor. He would go through it and get it ready for whenever they had another mission. He placed his weapon pouch off his leg and onto a small table. He slowly opened it as he placed a finger through the hole of a kunai and quickly turned. He brought the kunai up to the neck to the red-headed girl behind him. Fuck. Tayuya cried out, taking a step back. What the hell? Don't sneak up on me, ever. Sasuke told her as he placed the weapon back. I see you were able to get in easily enough. Yeah, just fucking fine. Tayuya rubbed her neck. She thought it would be funny to sneak up on the kid. How the hell was always on their guard even in their own home. Then again, given the history of this place, maybe she could see why. Having your older brother kill everyone here at night, she wouldn't sleep too heavily either. So where can I set up? There's a room down the hall. It was a spar for visitors that you can place your things. He told her. She shrugged as she went back into the hall and picked up her bag. She couldn't believe that she had to stay here again, but at least it was in a nice place. She wasn't hiding in the shadows or in some abandoned building or room with the others of her team. It was good to have some personal space. Honestly, sometimes the others really got on her nerves. The room was pretty decent, a little dusty, but then again it wasn't like she expected him to dust the entire place. Hell, given she had to hide out here, it gave her something to do. She sighed. She was told to do anything in order to get the Uchiha boy on their side, and she knew that anything meant anything. Any kind of manipulation or lie, even telling him the truth, even offering him her body if it came to that, she would do anything for the mission. But she would accomplish this mission. The boy had already accepted her offer, that was the first step. Now she just had to show him all the things that Orochimaru could offer him, and he would go willingly. Chapter 29. Home front. It had been nearly a week since the return from Wave and things were settling back to normal. Currently Naruto and Temari were in their yard continuing his wind elemental training. Naruto was glad that Temari was more like her old self. He did see her look sad at times when she thought he wasn't looking, but he knew that it would take time to get over it. He still felt sad thinking about the third Haku. Currently Naruto was trying to cut a rock in his hand again. He really wanted to get this done. He had been using clones to help him lately under Temari's watchful eye, of course. The first time he tried to do it with an army of clones, he collapsed after it. She had been worried and then pissed at him for going too far. So she was helping him while he used a small supply of clones. It wasn't as fast, but over the time they had been starting this, he felt he was making progress. Alright, Temari said from her place in front of the real Naruto. Call back all the clones and let's see how this works now. Okay. Naruto eagerly dispelled them and felt the head rush of information being slammed into his head. Although he was only using a dozen, it was still a little taxing. But he felt that he was a lot closer now. He looked at the rock and concentrated. He felt for the wind chakra like Temari had taught him to. He covered the rock in both hands as he shut his eyes and felt the chakra starting to move. It took him a moment, but the loud crack told him something had happened. He opened his hands and grinned. The rock was split in two. It wasn't a clean break. The edges were all jagged and there were cracks all along the split, but he did it. Yes. Finally I cut the stupid rock. Temari smiled a little seeing him jump up with joy. Whenever he accomplished something, he acted like he had moved a mountain. Well, it was impressive with how fast he had learned this. It had taken her a good year to fully master it, and he had done it in months. Or at least he had taken the first step at least. Settle down and look at this, Temari told him, picking up a rock herself. Naruto sat down and watched as she placed both hands onto the rock. There was the same cracking sound, but when she opened her hands, the rock was split perfectly. It was a seamless clean cut, unlike Naruto's cut. This is what you'll have to shoot for now. Just cutting it isn't enough, you need to also learn how to make a smooth cut like this. When you have, that means you have mastered calling out your wind chakra. She explained to him. Ah, I wanted to learn some cool wind jutsu, he pouted while crossing his arms. Temari tried not to sigh. It was strange how Naruto one moment could be kind of cool but then reverted back to a childish state. Well, he needed to learn patience. There was no way she was going to have him get himself killed by jumping into things like he had a habit of doing. Look, this is important, Naruto. Wind is the most dangerous type of element to use if you don't know what you're doing. I heard how one person tried to use this one wind jutsu without practicing enough, and you know what happened. The kind off his arm was flayed off his body, the entire arm. They couldn't fix that given all the other damage, and he lost his arm, and nearly died from it. Naruto paled at the thought of all the skin of his arm being ripped off. Maybe it was good to make sure he could do it properly after all. He knew that the damn fox would heal him, but he really didn't want to test the limits. He wasn't immortal or anything, and he didn't want to find out if he could regrow an arm. Plus he bet that would hurt a lot, and didn't feel like finding out what his pain threshold was either. Okay, so how can I learn to make it a cleaner cut? He asked. She smiled as she took his hands and placed a rock in them. I'll show you. Naruto looked at her as she did this. Sure, they were married, yes, they shared a bed and a few times had sex. But even just feeling her hands on his felt really nice. They were soft but strong from her own training and skills. Plus she really smelled nice and she was good looking. She noticed him watching and saw her blush a bit. He must have been staring a bit too hard. Concentrate on your work, she told him gently. Oh sure. He stuck his tongue out a bit as he tried to do what he had just done before with the previous rock. Temari did enjoy that he did look at her like that. It always felt nice to know that she had this effect on him. Plus she seemed to care more and more for him. First she was scared of him, then as she got to know him, they slowly become somewhat friends. As time went on she found herself caring for him and she was sure falling for him. She was pretty sure she was in love in him, after everything they had been through, and Temari was thankful for it. When this whole marriage thing was told to her, she feared she would be trapped in some loveless marriage for duty. But things were slowly changing for the better and she was actually glad this happened. Kakashi's apartment. It was a slow week for Kakashi. Training was done for the day with his team and there were no D-rank missions, so they had the read of the day off. Most likely Temari would help Naruto with his elemental training. Sakura said something about looking up some information at the library. He wasn't sure what, but he got the feeling the girl was looking for what type of ninja she wanted to be. She was at a crossroads it seemed, and he hoped whatever path she chose to follow she put her heart into it. As for Sasuke, well, he was as distant as ever. Something was going on as he left without a word and went back to his home as soon as he could. Even before he used to at least be with his teammates sometimes, now it was like he found the team an annoyance. He really wished he knew what he could do with that boy. Unfortunately his plan with Anko hit a snag. She had been on a mission when they had returned. He left a message at her place and she would show up at some point, he hoped. He also hoped that she could at least try and talk some sense into Sasuke. Kakashi wasn't sure, but he was worried that boy might be experimenting with the curse mark. It wasn't anything he noticed at first, but the boy seemed to be a bit darker lately and he knew the kind of effects that mark had on you. Plus with all the secrecy he had been doing, it could mean that Sasuke was doing something that Kakashi wouldn't approve of. The boy also had refused the new seal as well. He hoped he was wrong, it could be something else entirely. He sighed as he lay on his bed trying to read his book but failing. He just couldn't enjoy it while his mind was going a mile an hour. It was then that he heard a knock on his door. Curious, he placed his book on the nightstand and went to answer the door. He was pleasantly surprised to see a slightly dirty Anko with a bag on her shoulder. "Hey, saw your message, you needed my help with something?" she asked as she walked into his place. "I was hoping you might be able to talk with Sasuke." Kakashi filled her in on everything that was going on with him, even his concerns on what he might be doing. He could already see that Anko was a bit concerned as well. She knew full well the kind of life it was with that mark on you. How you had to constantly try and not have to worry about it, or give in to temptation. She sighed with a frustrated sound as she took her hair down. "Well, that certainly is something to worry about if he's using that thing. I told you that you should have just placed that new seal on him even if he didn't want it," Anko told him. "You know that I couldn't do something like that to another ninja without their say-so," Kakashi told her as he took in her appearance. "Did you come straight here after your mission?" "Yeah, I was going to take a shower but they had to shut off the water," Anko said, slightly annoyed. "They had a burst pipe, so for the next few hours my apartment is without water. So I figured I could use yours. Be my guest." Kakashi smirked as she slipped out of her coat. He picked it up. "You want me to wash this with your clothing?" "Well, you don't have to, but it would be nice," Anko said as she started to slip out of her clothing on the way to the shower. She knew that she was teasing him, but it wasn't like they hadn't seen each other naked already. She was totally naked by the time she hit the bathroom and placed her bag on the sink. She started the water and when the warm water hit her skin she felt instantly better. Her muscles started to relax a bit as she washed off days of sweat, dirt and grime from her body. By the time she was done she felt better than ever. She showered and now she needed one more thing. She opened the door and noticed he wasn't outside. Anko was a bit disappointed by that. She wrapped a towel around herself and found him in the next room. Kakashi had one of those washer-dryers that was put into a hallway closet. Lucky him. She had to use the laundry room at her place. She wrapped her arms around him. "So, now that I have to wait for my clothing to dry, is there anything we can do to pass the time?" Kakashi looked over his shoulder and noticed her lack of dress. "I think we can think of something." She grinned as she pulled off his mask and kissed him deeply. She had been craving this lately and wrapped her arms around him. She didn't care that the towel fell off her. Kakashi picked her up by her ass as she locked her legs around him as he carried them into the bedroom. Lemon. It didn't take long for them to get Kakashi in a similar state of dress as herself. They were happily laying together on his bed, kissing and feeling each other's bodies. She moaned when he started to suck on her neck. It was one of her pleasure spots and he used it all the time. She felt one of his hands going to her sex and started to work their magic on her. She moaned as she decided to return the favor. Her hand snaked its way down his body as she felt his hard manhood. She gently started to stroke him, hearing pleasing sounds from him. It was so nice to have someone she could have sex with whenever they needed it. It was just too hard to find a decent guy. Either they were good in bed but she could never see herself in a relationship with them. Or they seemed like a nice guy but came in like seconds. Kakashi seemed to be the best of both worlds. He was a decent guy, she got along with him and the sex was always enjoyable. Hell, he even gave her that new seal that helped to subdue that stupid curse mark on her neck. He really wasn't such a bad guy, so why were they just friends with benefits? Maybe because she didn't want to screw up what was a good thing. Besides, her in a relationship. What was she thinking? Shut up and just enjoy, Anko told her brain. I don't need to overthink this. Oh shit. God, he's good with those fingers. Kakashi started to trail his kisses down to her chest, making sure to give proper attention to her breasts. They really were nice ones too. Not too big, not too small, and they felt great. Plus he loved the sounds she made when he started to suck on her nipples. Oh fuck me, Anko moaned softly, grabbing his head as she started to take one of her hardening nipples into his mouth. The feel of his mouth working on the sensitive part, the way his tongue played with it. She didn't even had to tell him to bite down as he knew she liked it like that. I'll get to that in a moment, Kakashi chuckled as he started on the other one. To hell with a moment, do me now, she told him. Well, if you insist. He sat up and turned her onto her stomach. He pulled her hips up as she got on her hands and knees facing away from him. You better put that in the right hole, Kakashi, she warned him. She never did like anal, it was just too painful for her at the moment, but he didn't seem to mind. She felt his hand caressing her back, going along her spine, making her shiver in anticipation. Then she felt his sex organ slightly rubbing against her wet sex. She moved her hips, trying to get more feeling of their skin rubbing against each other. Then he lined himself up and pushed into her. She moaned out as her head hung down. She loved how deep he could get in this position, and with being able to angle his thrusts downward, he could rub against her G-spot too. He started with slow, methodical thrusts as she pushed her body back against him. Kakashi had to admit that Anko had a great ass. He groped it as they had sex. Then an idea got to him. He took one hand away and spanked her ass. The loud smack sound was heard with an outcry from him. Want more? Kakashi grinned. Yes, do it harder. She told him, getting turned on by this. She never told anyone, but she had this fantasy of being taken across someone's lap and being spanked. She just felt silly about it, so she never once mentioned it. Thrusting or spanking? Kakashi asked, amused. Both, she replied. He started to comply with her wishes. Each time he slapped her ass, she couldn't help but cry out in shock and pleasure. He would then caress it and then start again, plus he was going faster and harder now. After a few minutes of this, she just knew her ass would look all red, but it was so worth it. Oh god, I'm getting close. Fuck me as hard as you can, Kakashi. He grunted with the effort as he used both hands on her hips to pull her towards him as hard as he could. She was crying out in pleasure now. She couldn't even hold herself up as her arms gave out. She bit into his pillow, screaming to muffle the sounds. Then her whole body just started jerking as she screamed out as she climaxed. Kakashi, feeling how her body suddenly was now clenching his manhood, he couldn't take it anymore. With a few more hard thrusts, he moaned as he filled her body. After a moment of catching his breath and after his body was done, he leaned down onto her gently. Anko moaned in post-orgasmic delight, feeling his body pressed up against hers felt nice. They shifted to their sides as he held her to him. It felt nice just being like this. Both of them did like the sex, but these moments were nice as well. They didn't need to say anything. they just lay there holding of caressing each other lightly. Anko closed her eyes enjoying the feeling. This was something she never did before. Mostly it was either disappointing or after the orgasm she dressed or kicked the guy out of her bed. With Kakashi it was different, she actually liked just laying here in his arms. What she didn't know was that he was feeling the same thing. He liked having her here in his arms, it felt natural for some reason. But she wasn't totally satisfied just yet, she was ready for a bit more fun first. She turned around and faced him. She grinned as she pushed him onto his back and started to trail kisses down his body. She took his limp member in her hand and started some of her oral treatment on it. Kakashi groaned. He was still sensitive down there and the things she was doing with her tongue felt better than normal. She would moan as she licked him and when he was hard enough that's when she started to suck on him. She would do just the tip at first and slowly get more and more down. "Oh God, Anko," he said, feeling her warm wet mouth working on him. She really was great at this and the moans she made while doing it only added to it. "If you keep this up I'm not going to last long." She stopped licking her lips at him. "Well, we can't have that, can we?" She grinned as she sat up and started to straddle him. She eagerly took hold of his member and guided herself down onto him. "Oh yes, this is what a girl needs," she grinned, grinding her hips against his. Kakashi slowly caressed her body as she started to ride him gently. They started off slow, making this one last longer as they both wanted to enjoy it. She moaned as she threw her head back as she started to go a bit harder. She felt his hands on her chest as she ran her hands over his stomach. She really loved the six-pack he had on him. Soon they were going at it harder as she rode him harder. He pulled her down as he lifted his head to start taking one of her breasts into his mouth while she rode him. She cried out as she gripped the sheets, going faster and harder as he thrust back with equal force. She lost track of time as they continued on, but Anko couldn't hide it anymore. She cried out his name as she felt herself finally climax. She fell onto him, feeling him continue on. He gripped her ass as she moaned in pleasure, feeling him continue. He suddenly pushed against her as hard as he could, groaning in the wet warm feeling of his release. Lemon end. Both of them were tired and aching after their round of sex. Kakashi laid on his back with Anko snuggled up against him, resting her head against his shoulder. The sheets were a mess, and so were they, but they felt better for it. Anko chuckled as a thought hit her. "I'm going to need another shower now. God, I think I got more aches. Why does good sex have to give you that?" "Well, it's worth the price," he told her, looking down at her. She really did look great with her hair down, even if it was slick from sweat and sticking to her head like that. She looked up at him with her brown eyes. "What?" she asked, seeing him stare. "Just thinking how good you look even now," he said honestly. Anko smiled a bit. It was a little corny since she never really had the pillow talk before now. Truth was, she kind of enjoyed it. With Kakashi there was no pressure or awkwardness after sex. She just hit him lightly for going soft on her, but it did feel nice just being here. She moaned as she thought of what she had to do now. "Crap, now I need another shower and the aches and pains on top of the aches from sex won't help. I'm tired and I'm really not looking forward to the walk home." Kakashi hadn't thought of that, so the words were out of his mouth. "Then stay." She looked up at him to see if he was serious and he looked to be. She smiled as she sighed and relaxed. "You better be careful, a girl could get used to this." He chuckled at that as he gently wrapped an arm around her, his hand slowly stroking her bare shoulder. Honestly, thinking on it, was this really so bad having her here? It got him thinking about what if it was like if they actually were more than they were now. What they had now was very comfortable, but honestly they always seemed to be spending more and more time together. Sometimes he felt like he was making excuses to visit her. She seemed to accidentally run into him. What he didn't know was that she had known he was taking a certain route and decided to pass by him. She was finding that she liked having him around. He didn't judge her past like many had. He was fun to be around with as well. But both were uncertain as to bring up what they had and what they felt about it. Maybe it was just a need for human contact. After all, when they went home they went to an empty apartment. There was no one waiting for them or to welcome them home. When they spent the night at each other's, it felt nice to feel a warm body next to theirs. It was like a small hole that they hadn't known about was being slowly filled up. Anko was now thinking how when she got home these days she felt bored and isolated. The thing was she always felt like that, but since this thing with Kakashi she was actually aware of it. She also noticed something else. Normally when she saw couples out and about she just shrugged it off. She had never really thought about relationships, but seeing people now made get this longing. She didn't like it. She never envied anyone in her life, so why start now? If she wasn't so young she would say her age was catching up to her. Originally all she thought was that good friends and good sex now and again was all she needed. So why did she feel like she wanted more out of life all of a sudden? She felt how Kakashi was lightly running his hand over her shoulder. No one had done that to her before. What surprised her the most was how much she liked it. She knew that this was dangerous, thinking that maybe this whole thing with him was a mistake after all. Maybe it was time to cut and run before things got too complicated. She didn't want to ruin the friendship, but she found she would miss what they had now. She scowled a bit. Things had been going so well and now she just had to start thinking on things and it had ruined it all. Maybe she should talk to Kurenai about this. She hadn't told her friend all the details as to why she was hanging out with Kakashi all the time, but maybe her friend could give her some advice. With that in mind she forced herself not to think on this anymore. She was tired and wanted some sleep. Maybe in the morning she could just forget all about this and keep things going. Maybe even a little fun in the shower with him before she left at least. That would be some fun, at least if things went crazy. Uchiha Compound. Sasuke was currently in his training room trying to master the curse mark. It wasn't easy and Tayuya was a stern teacher. She didn't let up no matter what, although her personally liked that kind of training. The harder the training the more powerful you got in Sasuke's mind. Although she had a foul mouth, at least she was a strong ninja. From what he learned she was more a genjutsu type and a part of something called the Sound 4. But she was teaching him what he needed to learn. Apparently the curse seal was a lot more than what he thought it was. She didn't know everything, but what she did explain was that it altered chakra to the point where it was more powerful. Currently he called upon his powers. He saw the markings flow over his body and felt the strength flow into him. Now remember, you have to control the power constantly. If you lose control then you can't focus on the battle, she stated as she let the curse seal released on herself as dark lines crawled all over her body. When you can master this, the marks will cover your entire body like mine and not halfway like yours. So the full effect is to get the marks over my entire body. Sasuke asked her. Well, that will let you master level 1 of the curse seal, yes. Level 1. He was surprised by that, so there was more power to this seal. That was very interesting to him. So when I finish this I can get a new more powerful level. She laughed at him for a moment. Please, you're no way near ready for that. The curse seal when first applied is a 9 in 10 chance of killing you. You were lucky that you were the 1 chance in that 10 that survived. But in order to gain the next step you have to die. To die. He didn't like the sounds of that. He couldn't afford to die. What the hell does that mean, and does that mean you can't gain that power? I already got to that point, asshole. She didn't like any implication that she might be able to do anything or that she was weaker than someone. And I mean to die figuratively. There is this special ritual you have to go through, and like with getting the curse seal, it can kill you as well. But when you do pass it, you will gain a whole new power. She decided that he might need a small demonstration about it, so she called forth more power. She figured that this place was large enough that the odds of someone nearby sensing the power would be pretty remote. But she would keep it short at any case. Sasuke watched in fascination as the girl before him changed again. But it was more drastic this time around. Her skin became darker, the whites of her eyes became black, and her iris was now a dark golden color. Her hair remained the same, but now white horns were growing out of her head. Some would call it a demonic look, but to him she looked powerful. He could feel the power flowing off her as well, and he wanted it. This is something he needed. With something like this he could surprise Itachi and it would shorten the gap of power between them. This is the second level, Tayuya stated as she looked at him. This is the power that you can get with Orochimaru, and you know what? This is only the start of things. There is so many techniques, many that are forbidden that others can't or won't teach you. She could see him thinking about that, and it was true what she was saying. Orochimaru always did experiments to further the strength and power of both himself and those that served under him. Of course, those that were picked to be the experiments didn't have it so lucky, but they were usually the bottom of the barrel people that they could afford to lose. She was told to use any and all means to bring him over, and she could see that a little further enticement might be needed. He was already going down the path, but he needed a little more nudging. Thankfully, those days of watching him, she had learned one thing. He had some sort of rivalry with that blonde-haired idiot for some reason. Although maybe you don't want power, she said as she slowly turned back to her normal form. After all, you're not the most powerful genin in this village anymore, are you? What? He said darkly. I've listened to what people have been saying, she told him with a smirk. I mean, he was the one that defeated that Gaara guy, and what did they do? They give him the boy's older sister as a peace offering to him. They gave him a powerful female ninja so they could spawn a whole litter of great ninja. I mean, you have to rebuild your clan, don't you? A woman like her would have been great for that. Strong children, and after all, weren't the Uchiha one of the founders of this village? But no, they pass you up and give it to an orphan boy. Someone that has never come from any clan, that was the dead last, that from what I see only gets by through luck. Maybe they want you to mate with someone from this village instead, although that would be a pitiful sight. The girls in this village are all so weak in comparison with someone like Temari. Someone who is strong, intelligent, capable, knows what it means to be a ninja and the daughter of a Kage. She could see her words were worming their way into his mind. The seeds were being planted, of that she could see. As a genjutsu expert, she knew things about deception and manipulation. She looked around the room as she did, it was easy to see what made him tick. Being here, seeing all the empty rooms and homes brought back her own memories. This place was once home to many people, young and old, they worked and lived here, but now it was as silent as a tomb. He didn't know this, but she could relate to what happened to him. Looking at him, she saw the same rage and fire that had burned inside of herself not too long ago. She wanted the power to right a wrong, and Orochimaru had given it to her. So she served him, and she didn't regret it. She turned and left him there, letting her words echo in his mind, and she knew that soon he would come to her, but he needed to also trust her. That might mean she had to do something she didn't want to. If it was just giving him her body, that she could do, but to gain his trust she would have to talk about something. Something in her past that she had never told another living soul, but if she did, he would see her not as just another sound ninja, but as someone that could relate to his pain. Chapter 30. Path of Darkness. It was the afternoon and a few days since his house guest had moved in with him. Sasuke had been training non-stop with the girl when he got away from his team and then went with Tayuya to train in the use of the curse seal. Slowly he felt he was getting somewhere, but he couldn't help be motivated when she had shown him the second level of the mark. That form had looked powerful to him. She had later explained that, like the markings, the second form was different for each person. He wondered what kind of form he would have and the power it would hold. Unlike the training with his team, this training felt like he was actually learning something. Kakashi was being more even with his team, teaching them in groups and wasn't teaching them any new jutsus as he felt they were coming along fine. Well, that wasn't good enough for Sasuke. For Tayuya, she had been watching him as he worked. The boy, she had to admit, put more effort into training than even most ninjas she knew. But she knew what kind of motivation revenge could be. It was a fire that burned inside of you and wouldn't stop no matter what until it was satisfied. Although it was extremely boring in this village, she had to put on a genjutsu or even change her hair color and clothing and walk out looking like a civilian at times. Mainly it was just because she was getting cabin fever just waiting around all day for him to get back. Hell, by this point she looked forward to his time here. At least he was someone to talk to and train with. Sure, it was mostly work related, but anything was better than nothing. Still, she was starting to lose patience with how long this was taking. The boy should have left long ago, but he was still here. She had been trying to be subtle with pushing him to leave, but she soon found out that you had to plant the seeds and let things go from there. Any direct approach wouldn't work with him. Currently they were taking a break from the training, both were sitting out on one of the decks looking at the setting sun. She was suddenly brought back to an old memory, of a life so long ago and far away that it seemed more like the life of someone else. She wasn't that person anymore, she hadn't been for years. Although her patience was starting to run out, she really didn't like staying in a village that if they found out she was part of the team that had held in their previous Hokage with Orochimaru, well, it wouldn't be good for her. Sasuke was at the moment sitting on the floor in the lotus position trying to bring his curse seal powers to their full potential. He had his eyes closed as he tried to bring the power out of him. He could feel the darkness in it as it slowly moved through his body. He could feel his body becoming stronger, and by now he felt that he had more control over it. He was taught to let the power flow all over and through him, to allow it to roam through his body at a constant rate. It reminded him of his tree climbing exercise. He had to keep it at a constant rate, too much and it would overwhelm him. Too little and it would be too uncontrollable. If it fought it, then that's why he felt pain earlier in his fight with Gaara. She had explained how he had been trying to use his own chakra but had also been drawing out the curse seal at the same time but was denying the curse seal. Plus Kakashi's current seal on him wasn't helping either. But with the training he had found he could finally draw out the power at will and without any pain. How long do we have to keep doing this? Sasuke finally asked as he opened his eyes looking at her. I got this under control now. Look, if you want more I can only teach you so much, Tayuya said, annoyed at him. Only Orochimaru-sama can give you the full power and even more. Sasuke had heard this all before. He sighed as the power slowly went away. He stood up and glared at her. You always say that. Don't think I don't know what you're trying to do. I know you want me to leave and go with you, but I have to know if he can keep his promises of power. I won't waste my time anymore. He can give you the revenge you want, she told him seriously. And how do you know that? She paused. This was the moment she would have to tell him. It would be the only way to get him to know that Orochimaru could give him revenge. She just didn't want to relive that old life, but she had a mission. You think you're the only one that has suffered. You think you're the only one that wanted revenge for being wronged. And how would you know that? You ever wanted revenge for your life and family being destroyed? Yes, I do, you asshole. She shouted at him. You're not the only one that knows the pain of that. Sasuke looked at her for a moment. He hadn't expected that, but looking into her eyes he could see she was telling the truth. Those eyes filled with pain and revenge, were the eyes he looked into the mirror all the time. Especially lately, after his last meeting with Itachi, all he could think about was killing his brother. So did he ever give you what you wanted? Yes, he did, she said as she sat down and thought back to the memories. I suppose I should tell you the whole story, but I'm only saying this fucking once. You miss anything, too bad. I'm not telling you anything twice or anything, got it? She glared at him as she saw him nod his head. Flashback. It had all started back years ago in one of the smaller nations. She had only been 10 years old at the time. Her village was a farming community that worked in a fairly secluded area. She had been an only child in her family and she knew little of the world. What was the point? After all, she was learning from her mother to how to be a normal girl. She learned how to do everything from her. Her father even taught her how to play a flute, something she kept doing all her life. She didn't remember much of her village, but she did remember was that she had enjoyed her life. But then one day it had all changed. She had been helping her mother with the washing when the shouting had started. That's when they knew something had been wrong. She had pieced it together after the fact, but a group of bandits had came to the village. Since most main villages usually held contracts with certain ninja villages or were protected by other forces. But it was the smaller ones that suffered. They couldn't afford protection or weren't important enough to justify stationing troops. They ran to the house. Tayuya had remembered how scared she had been. Before then, the most violence she had seen was when some of the men got a little drunk in the streets. She saw black smoke rising and knew there was a fire. How bad, she wasn't sure at that moment. She just remembered that her mother rushed her into their home. Their home was slightly elevated off the ground as they had plenty of rain in the village. It prevented their homes from flooding. Her mother had been scared. When Tayuya asked about her father, her mother just said that he was most likely fine, but even at that age she knew that her mother had no idea. Her mother pulled aside a heavy basket and pulled up a section of the floor. Years later, Tayuya guessed that villages like hers usually had small places like this just in case of attack. She was quickly placed inside and told that no matter what she wasn't to say or do anything. Tayuya waited under her home. She could hear the sounds of battle outside. Cries and screams along with all kinds of things that gave her nightmares for a very long time after it. Then the door to her home opened. At first she thought it was her father, but there were many heavy footsteps. She had to cover her own mouth as she heard her mother shout and fight the men. But they were many and she had been just one. Tayuya closed her eyes wishing she could block out the sounds that came next, but she couldn't take them away from her mouth in fear. She couldn't trust herself not to make a sound. She had to hear what went on above her, until finally her mother was quiet. She felt the tears on her young face but still made no sound. She listened as they searched her home and then she waited. They left her home and she stayed. She had no idea how long she was under there. Day turned to night and finally when all she heard were the sounds of the night she crawled out. She found that she was the only survivor of that day. She found her mother and closed the door to the room. She couldn't look in there again. She found her neighbors and friends, even a young boy that she couldn't remember his name anymore, only that he brought her a flower once. She found an empty home and stayed there. The food would last for some time but not forever. She couldn't sleep for the entire night. She just huddled in a corner and held herself as her mind tried to process what happened. Her life had been destroyed that day. She found a couple of the men that had attacked her village dead. A pitchfork was in one, another had a scythe had decapitated him. They wore a strange symbol on their clothing. She took one, she wasn't sure why, only that she felt it might be important one day. She had no idea how long she had been there, or how long it had been. The place stank of death when a new group showed up. She hadn't left the village because where would she go? She had no knowledge of anything outside of the area. She had no idea where to go or what to do, so she had stayed, for the simple reason that she had nowhere else to go. When strangers entered the village dressed in strange clothing, she thought it might be them returning or another group. She waited with a knife she had found and hid herself. She wouldn't let other harm her again. She saw that one of them was alone from the others and so she ran at him. He only had the time to turn and cry out as she stabbed him. He didn't die right away but she kept on stabbed him. She was so filled with anger, pain and rage she didn't notice when he had stopped moving on the ground, when she was covered in blood or when his friends pulled her off him. "We should kill this bitch. Look at what she did," one of the masked men said. "Look at her. She looks like a filthy animal," another said, who was holding her as she fought him. "Has she been here this entire time?" Another one who was looking around asked the others. "This place is dead. Is she a survivor?" "Who cares?" the first said, pulling out a kunai. "She's dead." "Hold it," a calm voice said, and all of them froze immediately. It was then that she saw him for the first time. Orochimaru walked up to her and looked her in the eyes. She saw something in his eyes that made her freeze, something that was almost inhuman in his eyes as he stared into her, studying her. He grinned as he judged something about her. "So you survived and killed one of my men. I have to say that interests me. Maybe you were given a reason to live. Tell me, child, what would you do? If there is anything you want to do, what would it be?" She couldn't look away from his commanding eyes. She found herself answering him despite herself. "I want them dead. The ones that did this, I want them all to die." He chuckled at her answer and motioned for the one holding her to let go. "Tell me, if I offer you the power to kill them, would you swear your loyalty to me? Would you serve me?" She didn't even had to think on it. She had no life here anymore. She had nothing. This man was offering her a way to kill those that he'd taken her life. She looked up at him with a cold fire in her eyes. "Yes. Present time. So did you ever find them?" Sasuke asked, hearing the story. "Eventually," Tayuya said to him, looking at him. "It was my initiation into the Sound 4. I was to kill the entire group on my own, which was just fine to me. I waited until dark while watching them. At first I took out the people on watch easily enough. Then made my way through the small camp. There were only 50 of them anyway. I was going to make sure none of them got away. When I was ready, I used my flute to call on my 3 doki. They ran through the camp killing everyone I could find. I had set up traps in the day that when the few that fled tripped them up. I made sure that those traps were set up to ensure they would suffer before death as well. Then I found the leader of the group, the one that had ordered and led the attack on my home. I saved him for last, and when I got around to him, I had the doki pull his arms and legs off. She grinned at the memory. All the pain and suffering that man had caused in his life was paid back in full. I watched him die. He begged at first, but then he cursed me all kinds of ways. Eventually the blood loose got to him and he finally died. I went back and took my place in the team. Sasuke looked at her almost for the first time. She had avenged her past through Orochimaru, it would seem. He didn't find any lie in her story or in her words. It would also seem that Orochimaru, for whatever else he was, did deliver on his promises. That was something to think over. Konoha streets. At this moment Naruto was walking with Sakura. They had run into each other and decided to walk together since they were going the same way. It had been some time since they had hung out lately, as they were all busy it seemed. So how are things going? Sakura asked her teammate who was walking with his hands behind his head. Going great. Naruto smiled at her. Temari-chan says that pretty soon I'll be able to finally start learning wind jutsu. Although she wants to start me off small, but I'm sure that I'll get some new kick-ass jutsu. Sakura couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. It seems everyone is doing something these days. You and Temari are training together. Sasuke-kun is doing something. Honestly, I'm a little worried about him. Does he seem more distant lately? Naruto thought about it and nodded as he got a bit more serious. Yeah, he's starting to piss me off with his attitude lately. I mean, he just goes off alone after we're done for the day with the team. I don't see him around and hardly says anything. Sakura nodded. Sasuke was getting more and more distant, it seemed. She had no idea why. She kept trying to talk to him, but he just ignored her or said she was annoying. She thought about visiting him, but she knew that wouldn't be a good idea unless he actually invited her. She did respect his privacy enough not to try something like that. But she was stumped as to what was going on with him. Maybe he's just sulking about something, Naruto thought randomly. Or he's just secretly training. Maybe, Sakura said as they walked on. She sighed as she thought about that. You know, I've been looking up things in the library about different types of ninja. I mean, Temari is a wind user that uses her battle fans. You're a ninjutsu expert given how fast you learn high-rank jutsus. Really? He blinked. That was one of the few times she really complimented him. He grinned broadly at that. He always liked it when people complimented him. Thanks, Sakura-chan. I never really thought what type of ninja I was. I know I suck as genjutsu and my taijutsu is being improved on, thankfully. Sakura had noticed that. Yeah, but then you get to me. I don't come from some family of ninja or anything to learn from. Hey, me neither. Naruto offered. She paused to think on that. At least she had a family. Naruto didn't. Well, until he married at least. Well, what I mean is that I had no idea what kind of ninja I wanted to be. Usually you find your talents in something and train in that, but with my chakra control there is only two real paths for me. Either genjutsu, but Kakashi-sensei only knows how to deal with those because he has a Sharingan. Then the only other route is medical jutsu. In fact, there were a couple of other things, but she didn't like them. Plus the last mission had shown her that their team needed a medic. Kakashi had to use only basic medical skills to take care of their injuries. When they had gotten back, they had to go to the hospital to get checked out. She wanted to be useful to her team. She felt like she was watching them all get farther and farther away from her. Oh, you mean like Ba-chan? Naruto said to her. Naruto. You shouldn't call her that, she chided him. Honestly, you should have more respect for the Hokage. I will when she stops pretending she's not 50, he countered. Honestly, he didn't see the point in pretending you were younger than what you were. To him, hiding behind a genjutsu because you didn't want people to see your real age was silly. So he felt it was his duty to remind her that she wasn't young anymore. Well, that, and he knew how much it irritated her. Anyway. You think if I asked for her to train me she would? Sakura knew that asking training from the Hokage herself was not something most people would even try. After all, what were the odds that the Hokage would agree to that? plus the training would most likely be very intense. But she didn't care about that, she needed the training. From her time with Temari, Sakura had seen that she was behind where she should be and she needed to do something to catch up. Plus, if she was going to train as a medic, she wanted to be trained by the best so her skills would be an asset for her team. Although she was really nervous, what if the Hokage didn't train her? What would she do? Maybe she could find help elsewhere, but she really needed this. She needed to pull her own weight and be there to support her team in the best way she could, and this was the way she needed to do it. She just needed for the Hokage to see this, and then maybe hopefully she might be given a chance. Naruto noticed her worried look and smiled at her. Hey, don't worry. Ba-chan is pretty smart and she knows good potential when she sees it. You'll just have to be honest with her and show her your determination and she'll train you. You really think so? Honestly, he had no idea, it just sounded good to him. Naruto was a firm believer that if you kept a positive attitude, then there was nothing you can do as long as you threw in all your will behind it. It had worked for him up to this point anyway, so why change something that wasn't broken? Of course, plus I believe in you and I know you can do this. She smiled at him. It was nice to hear that from someone. In fact, she realized that he had always been there for her and had been trying to make her feel better. She just hadn't noticed it before now. She felt a little bad not noticing him before, but she had resolved to be a better friend to him, and to let him know that they were good friends now. Thanks, Naruto. You're a good friend, you know that. He only smiled brightly at her, chuckling a bit, just happy to hear that. Former Uchiha District. Anko walked along the deserted streets. Not many people liked to come down this way. Not that she blamed them, the sight of a massacre wasn't the type of place you wanted to live in. Many of the houses were falling into disrepair from being abandoned. Looking around, she saw that a few had been damaged in the sand invasion. A fire had caught on and had burned up a few houses before it had been put out. Thankfully, no one lived in them. She heard the stories, everyone had, how the spirits of the dead haunted this place. Kids would dare others to go into the so-called haunted houses. It was kind of annoying when they had to call in ninja to deal it at times. One of the great ironies was that it used to the old Uchiha police force that usually dealt with this kind of things. She didn't remember much about that old force, but from what she heard, it certainly freed up their ninja for other matters. They still hadn't been able to find a way to replace that unit, even after all these years. The only professional police force was all dead, no one was left to train the others. So they had to relearn everything that the Uchiha clan had started. There were reports and a few manuals for recruits that had been found in the old police station, but without anyone of experience to teach them. It was trial and error. Well, it wasn't her problem, she wasn't involved in anything like that, thankfully. She walked up to the only house that looked both cared for and lived in. This was obviously the place, so she walked right up to the front door. She considered what approach to use, but what was the fun in that? So she knocked on the door and waited. She knew the boy had to be here. After all, she could hear something moving around in there. She sighed and waited. She mentally counted as she figured how long it was to open a damn door. So when that time came and gone, she tried to door. It was locked, of course. Not that would stop her. She pulled out her lock picks and within seconds unlocked it. She snorted at that. As a ninja clan, you'd think the Uchiha would have invested in some decent locks. She easily opened the door and walked right in. Hey, anyone home? She yelled out, looking around the place. What are you doing here? Sasuke said, annoyed as he walked into the room. He didn't like people that just came into his home, especially since he wasn't alone. He took a moment and remembered this as that strange women in charge of the second stage of the Chunin exams. Why are you here? Kakashi asked me to talk to you, since you and I have something in common. Anko told him flat out. Sasuke scowled a bit. He didn't know that Kakashi knew this woman well enough to ask her to talk to him. He guessed that he should have seen something happen with how he had been. But honestly, he didn't see much a difference than how he normally was, and he was busy. But what he couldn't figure out was what in the world he had in common with this strange woman. That's why you broke into my home? Sasuke asked of her. Yeah, well, I got impatient. I mean, does it take you that long to answer the door? She told him, blowing off the fact she could literally get in trouble for doing so. off like it meant nothing to her. Look, kid, Kakashi is worried and he's wondering if it has anything to do with this. She pulled her top by her neck aside to show off her own curse mark, but with Kakashi's new and improved seal around it. Sasuke hadn't known that this woman had this as well, but then why didn't she use it? She obviously had Kakashi to something with it. Was this that new seal that he offered him earlier? It made sense on how he got it working, but still he wasn't convinced that this thing wasn't a curse. He had much more control over it now, and honestly he didn't see the problem. Look, kid, if you are using this or not I don't want to know, so you don't have to worry about saying anything you don't want to. Just listen to the voice of experience, Anko told him seriously. You may not know this, but Orochimaru was my Jonin sensei. He taught me a lot, although I didn't know it at the time, I was just a tool for him. You see, before he was found out he took me somewhere. I don't really remember all the details, he took a lot of memories from me somehow. It was a sore spot for her. How much he took from her she never knew. There were huge gaps in her memory and there was no telling what exactly she was missing. She spent a lot of time trying to fill in those blanks, but she knew she might never fully remember. Who knows what kind of important things to her that had been stolen from her. Anyways, he took me somewhere out of the way to put this on me, she pointed to where the seal was. Then he just left me to die, I don't know why. If Anbu hadn't come across me I most likely would have died. I don't know why he picked me, but if I had died then no one would have found me. I was used and then tossed away. That's how he works. If you've outlived your usefulness to him you're nothing to him. This damn thing has been a literal pain in my neck since I got it. It hurts sometimes and it can mess with me in important times. I could have been killed because of this. This was very true in the case when Orochimaru had come to this village. The seal had flared up in his presence and it had nearly cost her life. That's the thing with his gifts, they're like a snake. If you aren't careful with them, they'll bite you and you'll pay for it. And trust me, if there is anything I know it's how snakes are. Sasuke took this in, but honestly he wasn't sure even she had all the facts. She admitted to now having all her memories, and given that he was actually being trained, he had more control and the pain he hadn't felt in a long time. If she had gotten some kind of training then she most likely wouldn't have these problems. Well, you don't have to worry about it then. If that's all you came then you can show yourself out. He told her. Oh, one small talk and then you want to get rid of me, huh? Anko had a feeling that there was something going on. Maybe Kakashi had been right after all. The curse mark was also seductive in a way. It offered power but the price was just too high. Sasuke was trying to think of a way to get her out of here. The longer she stayed the more complicated things could get. She was growing suspicious and he couldn't have her looking too close into his life. There had to be some way of getting rid of her that made her think that nothing was going on. Sasuke-kun tilde. A very familiar female voice called out that made the boy's eyes bulge out. What the hell is she thinking? He mentally yelled out as he turned to look and stood there shocked. Tayuya came around the corner only in a bath towel that barely covered her body. The bath will be getting cold, so I thought, oh. I'm sorry, I didn't know Sasuke-kun had company. She quickly hid herself behind the corner looking like a blushing teenager that had been caught by her parents. Anko blinked a few times before laughing. This is what's going on. Geez, kid, didn't know you had a girl over. Damn, looks like the betting pool on your sexuality is done. Given how many girls threw themselves at you, people were starting to talk. What's your name, girl? Tayuya, miss. She did a really great job of sounding meek at the moment. Please, you're not going to tell my parents, are you? Anko smirked at this. Oh, Kakashi was going to love this. Nah, don't worry about it, in fact I'll leave you two to it. Guess you really do want to keep the clan going, huh? She winked at Sasuke before letting herself out. When she was long gone he glared at her. What the hell was that all about? Why, I thought she needed a reason to know why you were being so secretive, Sasuke-kun, she said, still in her sweat teen voice. Knock that off. Fine with me, asshole, she stated, going back to normal. You think I like stripping myself like this? I have my pride, you know, but look at it this way. At least now you have a cover story, so people won't be thinking you're doing something strange. She'll most likely tell your sensei about this and he'll leave it at that, or at least he should. She had to admit it was quick thinking on her part. Not many even knew what she looked like in this village, so she was pretty safe there. She had been surprised to learn that this woman had the curse seal. From the sounds of it, she was one of the first test groups, which one she had no idea, but it was certainly interesting. She also noticed the slight blush on the boy as he tried not to look at her. She grinned. It was kind of funny. The big bad Uchiha was still just a boy after all. What's the matter? You haven't seen a naked girl before. Tayuya laughed. Like you'd know what the fuck to do with one anyway. Now Sasuke openly glared at the girl. The hell is that supposed to mean? Oh please, you don't think I haven't heard all the stories while I've been out? She said to him, getting closer. She pretty much said it. All those girls and you never picked out one. So what, the almighty Uchiha clan dies with you, huh? What a sad end. So you just can't get it up, or you just fucking gay or something? I have a responsibility to both avenge my clan and ensure that when I do plan to revive my clan I have to pick the right woman. He shouted at her. This girl was infuriating at times, he just couldn't understand it. She has to be strong and have the makings of a great ninja. I don't want some weak girl that can't do anything. Huh. Sounds like that Temari girl again. Looks like you missed out on that. The other girls I've seen in this village are a joke. Tayuya had seen females of their age and she was disgusted by them. Only the Chunin level ones seemed to have grown out of whatever it was that made girls in this village so weak. Too bad, if you stay you'll have to pair up with some airhead. I weep for any children from that union. Oh, and you think maybe Sound has anything to offer? Sasuke asked her. I remember that kin girl, she wasn't much. Hell, she was taken out by that Nara boy. Tayuya hadn't known Kin, at least not personally, but she had served Orochimaru to the fullest in the end. You bastard. She died for our village and for Orochimaru. She gripped him by his shirt and the next thing she knew he pushed her back up against a wall. He held her there with her arms pinned to her sides and her towel fell. Both froze at that moment as they locked eyes. Go ahead and peek, you little fucker, she sneered at him. I doubt it will be the only thing you can do to a woman. Don't you ever shut up, he told her, and he wasn't sure why, but he thought of a way to silence her. He surprised her by smashing his mouth to hers. At first she didn't do anything, but she figured anything to seduce him would work, so she went with it. She didn't mean to actually enjoy it. That was a surprise. It wasn't kind or soft or anything you'd find in some cheap romance novel. It was more animalistic. All the heat in their argument seemed to transfer into it. He growled into her mouth and she returned it, feeling her body go on fire for a moment. Then he suddenly pulled away. He took a breath and then smirked at her. So that's how to keep you quiet. She blushed as she pushed him off her and quickly went to get her clothing. Fucker. She yelled at him, but she couldn't forget the heat on her lips. Sasuke for his part sat down thinking on what he did. He couldn't find her attractive, did he? She was loud, had a dirty mouth, they fought and things were heated. But she didn't back down from him. She was strong and knew the kind of pain he did. As he sat there he was just too confused on what to think at the moment, but he knew things might get more complicated from now on. Chapter 31. The Choice. Sasuke wasn't looking forward to the day. He hadn't slept well as his mind kept going back to that moment with Tayuya. Things were awkward around them that morning as well, as they both avoided the other. Maybe a line had been crossed, but why did he kept going back to that moment? Honestly, it had been to just shut her up, but it didn't make sense to actually enjoy it. At any rate, although he left his home to join his team, it wasn't a break from it. Knowing that Kakashi had asked Anko to talk to him, and what she had seen, he had a good idea that Kakashi would know he had a naked girl at his place. He sighed as he thought about that problem on the way to the training field. On the one hand, it was a damn annoyance to deal with this. He knew Kakashi might call him out on it, if nothing else but as just joking around. On the other hand, if word got around that he was seeing someone, maybe it would stop all those girls. Not one day went by when someone tried to give him something, ask him for dates or other things. They just couldn't get it, that he just wasn't interested in them. So he figured if he played along with this whole farce he could get some peace at least from girls constantly bugging him for dates. He walked into the field to see Sakura, Temari and Naruto already there. No surprised when Sakura waved to him and said a good morning to him. He was looking forward to stopping her constant fawning over him. Honestly, she didn't know the first thing about him. They hardly knew each other and he didn't have any romantic feelings for her. So why did she constantly try and gain his affections? At least lately she was training more so she wouldn't be useless on missions. He noticed Naruto and Temari together as usual and Tayuya's words from earlier came back. Looking at the taller female he had to think that she might have had a point about Temari. She was a very good ninja, better than any of the other females their own age in this village that is. As the last Uchiha he thought that any political marriage would have used him. He wasn't sure how he felt about her, but she at least had skills he could respect and was strong. But who did they chose? Looking at the blonde-haired boy next to her goofing off and showing off for Temari, who was trying not to smile at his antics, Sasuke couldn't help but feel that whoever came up with this idea was brain dead. That or they didn't know Naruto well enough. Honestly, the guy was the dead last, an idiot, had no sense of the word subtle either. Yet they picked Naruto over him. That was what really ticked off Sasuke. He had been passed over for Naruto. That was the thing that really pissed him off about the whole issue. The dead last was picked over the Uchiha. It was an insult now that he thought about it. Sasuke's dark mood didn't go unnoticed by the others. What the hell is his problem today? Naruto sighed as he was balancing himself on a tree branch as they waited for Kakashi. I mean, he always seems to have a stick up his ass about something. Temari cast a look to Sasuke and frowned. She had seen it too. In fact, he had been getting more and more moody lately. Hard to believe she once thought him handsome when they first met at the Chunin exams. Now that she got to know him, she was kind of thankful that the elders of both villages choose Naruto. She didn't want to think what kind of cold and emotionless marriage she might have been trapped in. Hey Sakura-chan, what did Ba-chan say? Naruto asked their pink-haired teammate. Oh, she said that she would agree to train me. Sakura smiled seeing the surprised looks from Temari and even Sasuke who overheard this. I went to the Hokage yesterday and asked her if she would personally train me. I did my best to convince her that I wanted to be a medic and I guess it worked. She's going to train me when I have spare time and when I'm not on missions or with the team. Wow, that's impressive. Temari wasn't kidding. Being trained by the legendary Tsunade herself was a big deal. Her name was known far and wide in the ninja world for good reason. Learning from her personally would most likely be intense but well worth the experience. Temari smiled approvingly at Sakura. Well, that's a good step in your training. I guess this means no extra training from me. Sakura bowed her head a bit to Temari to show her respect for the older girl. I know, but I want to thank you for everything anyway. I learned a lot from you and I hope to one day be as strong as you are. With Tsunade, you might end up being stronger. Temari wasn't sure how far Sakura would go, but under Tsunade there was just no telling what the young girl would be able to accomplish. Sasuke meanwhile was nearly floored. Now Sakura was getting special training. Sakura, the weakest member of their team, was going to train under the Hokage. He would have laughed at this if he could. The bitter taste of acid filled his mouth and stomach as he seemed to be passed over yet again. He needed training to fight and kill Itachi. Did no one in this village cared that the man that murdered the entire clan that helped found this village still walked free? Years had gone by and what had this village done? Put his brother in a bingo book and that was pretty much it. It made him sick. His clan helped created this village. They were the police force. They had been the backbone of this village for a time, and what did that earn the Uchiha? Nothing. Where were the Anbu when his family and clan were being slaughtered? Where was the justice for what had been done? He had to avenge his clan because no one else seemed to be up for the task, but how was he supposed to meet his brother without the proper training? It wasn't like he wanted to be a medic, but Tsunade could in theory teach him things that he could use. That monstrous strength, if he could learn it, was a prime example. But it was all going to Sakura. If being passed over by Naruto was an insult, this was a slap in the face to him. Ah, good, you're all here. Kakashi's voice broke everyone out of their thoughts as they viewed the lazy Jonin. You're late, Naruto and Sakura said in unison as usual. Truth was he was only an hour late, so it wasn't too bad, but still he was late. Kakashi smiled and rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, sorry about that. I had a run-in with a friend who told me something interesting. He cast a look to Sasuke. Sasuke felt the man was grinning. It was hard to tell with the mask, but he figured to get it out there. Just get it over with. I knew she would tell you what she saw. Well, it is juicy news. Kakashi smiled again as he nearly giggled at the thought. What's going on? Naruto asked, jumping off the tree. Is there something going on? Kakashi looked to Sasuke, who just sighed and nodded before facing the other way. Kakashi looked to his other students. It seems like you're not the only one with someone, Naruto. I asked a friend to talk to Sasuke about something. Turns out I might have been worried for nothing. He cast a look to Sasuke. You know, if you wanted to get home early to visit that girlfriend of yours, you just had to say so. We could have worked something out. Girlfriend was the single reaction out of the other three members of the team. Sakura looked to Sasuke. She felt like her heart was breaking. She was trying so hard to be stronger, to be a better ninja. Yes, it was primarily for the team, but a part of her had hoped that he would also take notice of her. Now he had someone. There were so many questions. Who was this girl? When did this all start? Why hadn't it been her? Suddenly her good mood in being trained by the Hokage didn't seem as happy anymore. She felt like someone was ripping her heart in two. All this time, she had hoped that maybe it could be possible, but was everything she had sacrificed, her friendship with Ino, her training that she should have done. All the years trying to get him to notice her as a girl, it all just seemed like a waste in that moment. What the hell, man? Naruto said to the dark-haired boy. Since when did you get one? What does it matter? Sasuke told him. My personal life is just that, personal. Well, what about? He paused as he cast a quick look to Sakura. He could see how hurt she was by this. It was no secret that she must have liked Sasuke as much as he had before Temari entered his life. A bit of him still did care. She was his first crush, even if Temari was his greatest love. So had also become a better friend to him recently, and he didn't like to see his friends hurt. Well, what about what? Sasuke asked him. Naruto wanted to say something about how Sakura felt about him, but he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked to see Temari shaking her head slightly. She knew what he was going to say, but the last thing Sakura needed was to bring in that. She cast the younger girl a sympathetic look. She had never had her heart broken like this before. Naruto was her first and only real relationship in her life. The only real loss she had was her mother. Well, there was her father, but honestly the man was only a father in name, really. So who is she? Sakura asked, surprising the two blondes. Just someone I met recently. Sasuke didn't want to give too much away. He figured the less they knew the better. It was the usual D-rank missions, deliveries with needing to paint a fence. Naruto of course got covering in paint. Temari had smirked at it, and he had the bright idea to take some of the paint on his fingers and wipe them on her cheek. This led into a retaliation by her, and soon both were being covered in pain, although Temari, while a bit mad at being so messy, had to admit she enjoyed it. After that they broke for the day. Since Naruto and Temari needed to get cleaned up, they were all for it. Sakura said she had to meet the Hokage for training at any rate and made a simple goodbye. The entire day had been hard on her. She tried to not look at Sasuke, but every time she did she felt a pang of sorrow in her heart. This left Kakashi and Sasuke alone for a moment, and the Uchiha wanted to ask their Jonin-sensei something. Kakashi was about to leave himself before he noticed Sasuke looking at him. He could tell the young man had something to ask of him. Yes. I need extra training, Sasuke told him. If the others are done, I want to train some more. I need work on the Sharingan, and you're the only person that could teach me anything. Kakashi sighed. In all honesty, he was kind of tired and was looking forward to a nice relaxing read. Plus, all in all, Kakashi had to learn much of the Sharingan by trial and error, as he wasn't allowed to read any of the Uchiha scrolls on the subject. He knew a few genjutsus with the eye, how the basics worked, but there was supposed to be special abilities found in each eye, unique to that person. Kakashi never did figure out what Obito's might have been. There might have been hints in the Uchiha scrolls, but he was fine with what he knew. Honestly, I'm not sure what else I can teach you, Kakashi admitted to the boy. There are a few things, but I think once you get the basics down, it's all up to you to figure out the rest. Plus, I don't know everything about it. Sasuke didn't look pleased with that. Then how about something else? A new jutsu or something? Kakashi sighed. This was the same old thing with him. always asking for more. Didn't he get enough when they trained for a full month together? The boy still wanted more and more power, and he kept telling him that he had enough. Honestly, at the point you are now, the only thing you can do is train up what you have. You have already an impressive amount of skills for a genin, it's best to sharpen those and improve them. If you only focus on more and more techniques, they won't be very strong or effective. Plus, now that you're in a relationship, you don't want to keep your lady friend waiting. He smiled before turning into a puff of smoke. Sasuke couldn't believe that he had just been blown off like that. If he had been angry before, he was getting close to livid right now. He made his way to his home in a foul mood as his mind started to think on what possible future he had in this village. Uchiha compound. Tayuya was having just as hard a time as Sasuke was with both lack of sleep and dealing with what happened yesterday. She was irritable as she kept tossing and turning in the night, her mind refusing to let her rest. But no, her mind kept replaying yesterday all night long. Worse was in the morning, she couldn't even look at him in the eye. She hated this. She wasn't the type to be like this, it made no sense. Why was she like this? She spent the entire day trying to keep busy and to take her mind off things. But she couldn't. It just kept crawling in there, and she was near the point of pulling her hair out and screaming in frustration. If her team could see her now, they would laugh at her. The supposedly strong Tayuya, acting like such a girl. It was kind of sickening to her, but she was having a hard enough time as it was without thinking of what they would say about it. So she spent the entire day with her mood going worse and worse as time went on. She cleaned up the room she was staying in. She even nearly started to clean up the house, but suddenly realized this wasn't her house and why should she clean it? So she was bored. She tried to spend the time training, but her concentration was off. Eventually, she just went to the bathroom for a long soak in some hot water. She tried to relax as the warm water soothed her body. She tried to think on things and wonder how she got herself into this fix. Sure, Orochimaru told her to do whatever it took, but she wasn't supposed to feel anything if she did try this out. She tried to be reasonable. This was just some physical thing, that was all she figured. But still, it was annoying. It was distracting, and she couldn't afford to be distracted. Since the hot bath wasn't working like it should, she got out and drained the water. Drying off, she put on a robe and figured to get dressed in her room. She got into the hall still in an irritated mood and saw that she wasn't alone anymore. Sasuke was standing there also in just as bad a mood as she was, although he paused at the state of dress she was in. Her long red hair was still somewhat damp and clung to her body, and the robe was opened enough to see a leg and part of her cleavage. He must have been looking a bit too hard as one of her hands came up to close the gap in her robe, her face slightly flushed. "What the fuck are you looking at?" she yelled at him. "Oh please, I bet you planned for that just like yesterday." Sasuke shot back, feeling like he needed to get his frustration out on something. "What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Like I don't know that female ninja are supposed to seduce their targets." "Oh please, like you would know what to do with a woman," Tayuya shot back, smirking at him. "You kiss like a little boy." "What was that?" Sasuke said darkly. He had been simmering all day, and the last thing he was going to allow was to let this foul-mouthed girl badmouth him. He already felt like the entire village had slighted him. He wasn't going to let his house guest do the same thing. "Maybe I just felt sorry for you. After all, who would want a foul-mouthed little girl that didn't know what she was doing anyway?" She ground her teeth at the dark-haired boy. "Little girl. I'll have you know that I'm at least a year older than you." She was right up in his face now, a finger poking his chest. He didn't like that, so he quickly grabbed her wrist. "Let go of my wrist or I'll spoil those fucking good looks of yours so you won't have to worry about women throwing themselves at you." "Oh, so now I'm good looking, huh?" He smirked at her. "Too bad you're not my type." "Oh, and what's that? A competent ninja, or do you actually like those useless little girls all over you? Or do you really have a thing for the guys? Wouldn't that be the biggest joke in the world?" She laughed at him. The last Uchiha who has to rebuild his clan, but oh wait, he can't because he likes boys. Sasuke had enough of people laughing at his clan for one day, plus there was only one way to shut up this foul-mouthed redhead. He pushed her against a wall to her surprise and kissed her again. Despite herself, she responded in kind. It wasn't about love or crushes or anything, it was pure animal instinct that seemed to take over them. They went at each other like they were trying to devour each other. Tayuya had no idea what was going on, only that one moment they were yelling at each other and now she was sucking the air out of his lungs. She felt like she was burning inside. She hadn't felt this fire before in her life, but it was hard to resist. Sasuke didn't know what was going on either, only that the entire day had been stressful and irritating. He needed something else to focus on, something that he could let out all his build-up emotions. Something exploded inside of him that moment and he just couldn't stop himself. Before he knew it, they nearly crashed through the door to her room. He gave no mind as his body seemed to work as if on autopilot. He pushed her down onto the bed, but she didn't give up that easily as she quickly threw him onto his back and attacked him as well. This wasn't anything gentle, this was more primal, animalistic as she nearly ripped off his top. She saw that he might grow into a fine figure one day. He was on his way, that much was for sure as she ran her hands over his exposed flesh. There was no love making here, this was pure raw passionate sex in the most carnal senses. It was like an animal had been released from both of them as they tore each other's clothing off and went at it with wild abounded lust. When Tayuya woke up, it was still night by the looks of things. She turned to look on the other side of the bed to see Sasuke was sitting facing the window. She sighed as she wondered if this had even been a good idea to begin with. It was stupid, and now what was she going to do? She sat up facing away from him as she thought of what to say now. Did he regret what they did? Did she? That was something she wasn't sure about. She was still feeling really confused right now about all of this. You said that Orochimaru can give me the power I need, right? Sasuke asked her, knowing she was awake. Yes, she told him as she looked over her shoulder at him. He was silent, looking through the window as he was coming to terms with something. You know, I was told all these stories about my clan. How before there were villages, they were one of the greatest of clans. One of the most feared and respected in the world. How with the first Hokage they created this village, became the police force for this village since the start. I was brought up in that environment. Everyone respected my clan, everyone looked up to the Uchiha. I was so proud to be an Uchiha, I still am. But you know what I recently have come to terms with? This village owes my clan so much, and when they were slaughtered they did nothing. I need to avenge my clan and rebuild it, and I'm overlooked. Everyone is growing and learning more. Hell, even Sakura is getting training from the Hokage myself. They even paired Naruto of all people up with Temari for this marriage, and I know what kinds of things are expected from that. I need power, and today I asked Kakashi for more training. To help me with understanding my Sharingan or anything else, but he blew me off. Sasuke clenched his teeth, remembering that. You, however, are the only person that is offering to give me what I need. The only person offering to give me the power I need to take down Itachi. He looked at her and she was surprised by the intensity of his look. I'm going to ask you this once. Will Orochimaru give me the power I need for my revenge like he gave you, and will I be able to take down Itachi? Tayuya nodded. Yes. Although he wants you to be a host for him, by now he's already most likely picked a new one. You'll have 3 years to train under him and kill Itachi before you have to uphold your end of the bargain. Sasuke thought about it. 3 years was a lot of time to train, and it could be possible. Orochimaru was one of the Sannin, there was no telling what he could learn under him. Although even if this was able to complete his revenge, there was still the question of the restoration of his clan. He looked to Tayuya. Maybe there was hope for that as well. But he would have to see where things went, but he felt his choice was clear to him. If I choose to go with you, how long will it take to make preparations to leave? Do you need to send some kind of signal, or can we leave right now? He asked her. She blinked for a moment before grinning. She got up and looked through her clothing and picked up a piece of paper she kept on her persons at all times. She opened the paper and with a kunai she pulled from her clothing too and made a small cut on her finger. She ran the blood across the paper as a seal showed up. Soon it disappeared. This was a signal summoning seal that she had been given. She wasn't sure how it worked, only that it had something to do with Orochimaru's summoned snakes. She had been on the receiving end of these. A snake would show up among them with a message or just some kind of symbol which they were looking for. This was to signal the rest of her team that they were coming and to get ready. They were camping far enough away to keep out of sight of any patrols but close enough that they would get to them easily enough if they kept a fast pace. There, my team will be waiting for us, and if you really want to do this, we do it now. Then I'll pack, we leave tonight. He told her. You sure about this? Once you leave there is no turning back. She warned him. He paused a moment before putting on his clothing. There's nothing for me here. Chapter 32. Leaving. Sound Village. In one of his chambers, the leader of the Sound Village, Orochimaru, was resting up. The underground base was like all the others. Rock walls made out of the ground, cold, and had many tunnels all over the place. The room, lit only by candlelight, showed Orochimaru all wrapped up in bandages. The new body was working out well so far, he just hated the time it took to make the modifications he needed to them. At least this time he was back in a male body, not that he really cared, but the few female bodies he had inhabited took more modifications. The first time that he took a female host, it was an adjustment period, getting used to it. Plus he had to get rid of certain other problems that only females have. He didn't want to deal with that. After all, he would only use the body for a few years before shedding it away. There was really no point in having to deal with those issues while using it for that small amount of time. But the new body was a freedom for also the pain he had been inflicted with. The arms of his previous body slowly rotting away, that had been unpleasant to say the least. Now he had no more of that hellish pain racking his body at every waking moment. Plus he could use his hands again. The time he spent unable to do the simplest of things with his hands had been a great humiliation to him. He flexed his hands as he tried to get a feel for them. It would take time to break in the new body, but time is something he now had plenty of. There was a knock on his door as Kabuto entered. The snake summon from Tayuya has been sent. Ah, excellent. Orochimaru grinned. The rest of the Sound 4 would already be on their way to meet up with them. He had hoped that the transfer to Sasuke could have gone earlier, but no matter. He would have the Sharingan. I had to admit it took her a bit longer than I thought to get him to leave. You sound so sure that she would have accomplished her mission, Kabuto asked his master. Truth was, he didn't think much of the girl. She was strong for her age, but beyond a good fighter, he didn't see her as being one that could convince anyone of anything. I planned things out from the start. Orochimaru smirked behind the bandages. You see, you must never underestimate how basic needs, desires, and instincts are always playing inside of humans. People try to think they are above animals, and although people are more complex, they still fall back on their basic needs. The girl's past would help make it seem that Sasuke-kun isn't alone in the world, that there is someone else that knows his pain and can understand. That would help open the door, and knowing her, she would have told him in order to gain some trust. Although she's not in the least diplomatic, there is another thing I worked on. Did you give her the injections I asked before she left? Of course, and I have been wondering, what did you have me give her? Kabuto asked him. He had only been given 2 vials to inject into the girl. He hadn't seen the compound before, obviously one of Orochimaru's experiments. Orochimaru chuckled. You see, like animals, people respond to certain stimuli. Although they are not aware of it, there are things such as the scent of pheromones that get registered. One of them was to help her increase this amount, making her more desirable. A love potion. Kabuto smirked as he said it. It sounded kind of childish to say it out loud. Hardly. This is science, not fantasy, Orochimaru said, annoyed. You see, the pheromones would only open the door one way. She was told to try and get close and keep close to him. What she didn't realize was that she was slowly overloading his senses. He won't be able to resist his primal urges after some time. All it will need is some kind of trigger. And you know what the greatest thing is? He could actually form an attachment to the girl because of it. Controls are very important for a leader to have over those that follow him. I need insurance to have some leverage over the boy. And the second one? Kabuto asked, now interested. A solution that was similar. It would heighten her sexual desires slowly as well. Against an emotional attachment could be formed. Like I said, leverage is a very important thing, and although she is totally loyal, it doesn't hurt to add more control now and then. Although I had a feeling she would do anything to get him to join us, I wanted to be sure. Kabuto had to admit that Orochimaru was one to play on people's desires and weaknesses. It was like his master could see a person's weakness and use that to his advantage with no morals to get in the way either. If you want to ensure that Sasuke-kun joins us, are you not worried that the Leaf will make a pursuit team? Orochimaru considered that for a moment. It was sure that Konoha wouldn't let their only Uchiha left to just run off. Although the rest of the Sound Four would be on the way, they might be overpowered if Konoha could send a good enough force. You might be right, Orochimaru conceded. Here is what I want you to do. Konoha. Sakura yawned as she slowly made her way home. She had just finished with her training. Right after she left her group, she had met with the Hokage for physical training. Or as Sakura called it, learning to survive to see the end of the day. She was sure she would be feeling a lot of her new training tomorrow. After that, she was taken to where she would learn the medical side to her training. Shizune had helped to overlook her with the Hokage got busy. Mainly it was just all theory right now. Once she had a working knowledge, she would be put that into practice. There was so much information and she had only just scratched the surface of it all. But she was glad for this chance. She knew that she could become a useful member for her team at this point. She felt that she had made the right choice after all. It was pretty dark out. Thankfully, she told her parents that she would be coming home late tonight after dinner. Sakura wasn't sure what she wanted to do first, a hot bath or just go straight to bed. Both sounded nice to her at this moment, but she would decide when she got home. She looked around. Hardly anyone was around. All the shops were closed up and only the late-night clubs or bars which were deeper in the village were open. Currently she was on the main road from one of the massive gates that ran through the center of the village. This was the quickest path to get home but also the most barren. Not one person would be on this road at this hour, she bet. All the homes were further away, so there was no need for someone to be on this path. So you could imagine her confusion when she noticed two people walking towards her. At first, because of the dark and the light the street lights were giving, which wasn't much, she couldn't make out who at first. Then it was Sasuke, but the person next to him she didn't know. It was a girl, that much she could tell in the low light, one with long red hair. At first she stopped as they noticed her. Sakura thought that this girl must be the girlfriend she was told about. She looked a bit older. Was that the type that he looked for, older girls? It might explain why no girl in their class had ever caught his eye, but then she noticed something else. They were both carrying packs. Not only that, she noticed the girl wore shoes that only ninja wear. But she never had seen this girl in the village before. While Sakura's mind was taking all this in, Sasuke had cursed his luck. When he saw someone coming, he had hoped it wouldn't be anyone that knew him, at least personally knew him. Of all people, it had to be Sakura. If it was a stranger, then they might not have noticed or bluffed his way by them. He could already tell that she was making conclusions on what she was seeing. Despite all her weaknesses, she was smart, too smart sometimes. This going to be a problem? Tayuya asked him, feeling the tension building up. Let me handle this, Sasuke told her. Sasuke-kun, what's going on? Sakura asked him. Why are you with this person and why are you two packed as though you're leaving the village? She wasn't sure what was going on, but something really didn't feel right. We're going to a romantic getaway, so you can just go along now, Tayuya said to Sakura as she placed her arm around Sasuke's. She could feel Sasuke's glare as he wanted to handle things, but honestly this was just too fun. This was obviously some girl that had some crush or something on Sasuke. Well, time for the girl to learn he was off the market and leave. Sakura noticed how Sasuke gave a small glare, but he didn't remove his arm from hers or any of the other things he normally did when a girl tried something like that. He didn't even call the redhead a name or something, saying that she was being annoying or anything else. She knew that he was seeing someone, but knowing about it and seeing it were just two separate things. She hadn't even came to terms that all her efforts had been wasted, then this comes out in front of her. But despite this, there was no way that Sasuke had permission to leave the village. You couldn't just leave just like that. Even if it was to visit a visiting town, you needed to fill out a location form. This was to keep track of their ninja, and also if someone went missing, then they had a place to start looking. It was a security feature that all villages used just in case something happened. But even if he did, Team 7 would have been informed and he certainly wouldn't be leaving in the middle of the night like this. It was like he was trying to avoid being seen, but that wouldn't make sense. None of this made sense to her. Go home, Sakura, Sasuke told her as he and Tayuya started to walk past her. This doesn't concern you. Sakura watched as he walked by her with that girl hanging on his arm. Something in her just snapped. All the emotions she had been bottling up, all pain and uncertainty just couldn't be contained anymore. Sasuke-kun, wait. Sakura yelled out, making the two stop. Please, I don't understand what's going on. Why have you been so distant lately? Why are you with this girl? Why are you two leaving in the middle of the night? Please, I want to know. I have to know. Don't you know that we care about you? That I care about you? Oh, I think I'm going to be sick, Tayuya said as she unlinked her arm to glare at the younger girl. What next? You're going to say you're in love with him or something? What a joke you are. Sakura's fist clenched in her hands. I do love him. I love him more than anything, more than you ever would. Please, you don't know the first thing about him, Tayuya told her with a sneer. You can't understand his pain, what he's going through and what he needs. You say you love him. You don't even know the meaning of the word. You're just some silly little girl playing ninja while trying to make the boy you have a crush on fall for you. What? You got some silly fantasy life built around it already. Shut up. Who the hell are you anyway? Sakura could feel the hot tears starting to fall. Her heart was breaking and she needed to know why her heart had to suffer. I try so hard to have him open up to me so I could understand him. I don't like him in pain and I try so hard for him to see me. Tayuya wanted to laugh at how pathetic this was. Well, that right there proves my point. You'll never understand him because unless you know his pain he'll never open up. I do, and I'm giving him everything he needs, while you just hold him back. That's not true, Sakura said weakly. She knew she was the weak link in the team, but she was trying her hardest to be better. Sakura, stop this, Sasuke said, not even looking at her. You're just embarrassing yourself. Sasuke-kun, Sakura said softly. This village had done nothing for me but hold me back. I see this now, he told her. This village holds nothing for me anymore. I need to be strong and I can't do this here. Why you're leaving? Sakura came to the realization of what was going on. He was leaving with this girl. She wasn't sure why, but she knew she had to be the reason why he was saying such things. Please don't go. I need you here. Please, I love you too much. God, you're sickening, Tayuya said to her. You said you love him again and yet you think that's going to change anything. Here's a little information for you. Just a couple of hours ago we got done having sex. How's that grab you? Sakura looked on horrified at the woman. That's right, Tayuya smirked, seeing the pain on the other girl's face. I gave myself to him and he accepted. You want to know what he's like in bed? Shall I tell you the sounds he makes or what he likes to do? Shut up, Sakura shouted out, closing her eyes, not wanting to hear this. She had been wanting for Sasuke to be her first everything. Her first love. Her first kiss, her first time. But this girl got there before her. For some reason Sasuke wanted this stranger more than a girl that tried everything to gain his heart. Don't make this any more difficult, Sasuke told her, giving her a cold look over his shoulder. I won't let you go, Sakura yelled out. She knew that if he left he would never see him again, plus what would happen to his status if he abandoned the village. He would be labeled as a missing nin. He would be hunted for his entire life. She had to yell out to get someone to hear her and stop this from happening. Just before she yelled, the wind was knocked out of her. She tried to gasp for air after Tayuya's fist left her stomach. The older girl grabbed her hair and sent another few shots to Sakura's ribs. Sakura was still too weak from her training to put up any kind of fight. Her arms were already feeling sluggish, and without the air and the pain it was hard to make them move at all. She was thrown to the ground as she managed to cough as an arm held her stomach. You know, it's girls like you that pretend to be ninja that just piss me the fuck off, Tayuya said with a kick to the ribs. She was sure she heard a crack as at least one of them broke. Sakura cried out in pain as her body was racked in pain. Shall I kill her? Sasuke thought about it. Sakura was a very annoying girl, but she had been on his team and she had proved useful a few times. She had defended him when he was unconscious in the forest of death, so maybe this would be his way to even the scales. He didn't want to owe anyone anything, so he considered this his payment for that. Just knock her out. We're wasting time with her. TCK. Fine, Tayuya said and gave a kick to Sakura's head. Leaving the pink-haired girl on the ground beaten and slightly bloodied, Tayuya knew that when the girl woke up she would hardly be able to stand, and if she had dislocated the jaw, the girl wouldn't be able to talk for a bit. Although she wasn't sure about the jaw thing, she could try again, but Sasuke was right, they needed to leave. The two of them left her there as they made their way to the main gate. They picked this moment because the lookouts would be getting tired and bored, plus they knew how to cross the protection field without alerting the village. With the night covering their tracks, it would be morning before they knew what was going on. Morning. Uzumaki residence. Temari woke up in their bed feeling good. She slowly became aware of her husband sleeping against her. She was on her side with him behind her, an arm around her waist. She couldn't stop the smile that formed on her face as she closed her eyes and enjoyed his warmth. She could feel his breathing on her neck, which tickled a bit, but she didn't mind that either. Honestly, at this moment she felt like she wanted to sleep in for once. They weren't supposed to meet up with their team until the afternoon, and she figured that she could sleep in. After all, they were all kept busy to help the village recover. That made her feel a pang of guilt, knowing what Suna had been tricked into doing to this village and itself. She had slowly come to see this village as her second home, and as she got used to it and meeting new people, she felt a sense of ease here. In Suna, in such a hostile environment, the people were a bit different. Because in the desert every day out there could be a fight for survival, but that was not so here. Maybe that was why so many felt that the Leaf were weak, because they lived in a pleasant area with no worries over things like water or the environment. But that was just what others wanted to see. In actuality, the village was very closely knit together. Everyone worked with everyone. It was no wonder that teamwork was a major teaching in this village for its ninja. That they were stronger together than on their own, but right now none of that mattered to her. Right now she just wanted to sleep in her comfortable bed with Naruto with her. Of course, whatever god or gods were listening to her thoughts choose that moment to torment her. A knocking on the door was heard and she growled in frustration. She checked the clock by the bed and it was still too early for visitors. Whoever it was, she hoped it was just someone trying to sell something and then would go away if she ignored it. But it didn't stop. In fact, the next knocks were louder. She sighed as she got out of the bed, casting a look at Naruto, who was still asleep. She really was envious at how deep he could sleep at times. Putting on a robe, she marched angrily down the stairs, hoping that whoever it was had better have a good excuse. She was having a good morning and now it was ruined. She swung open the door angrily just before the person knocked again. What? She snapped at the person before realizing who it was. It was a masked Anbu officer who flinched at her voice. "I'm sorry, Uzumaki-san, but the Hokage requested you to her office as soon as possible and to dress for a mission." For a moment she blinked, wondering at what he called her before mentally slapping her head. She kept on forgetting her name change. It was still something she was getting used to, as not many people called her that, usually just Temari. A mission already? Temari couldn't believe her luck. Did she disrespect a shrine or a Buddha statue at some point? She didn't think so, but whatever had cursed her she would find out and deal with it. This was getting ridiculous. "I'm sorry, but I wasn't told the specifics," he said to her. "Only to get you both to the tower." "All right, we'll be there as fast as possible," Temari told him. The masked man nodded and then disappeared. She wasn't sure if he had been a shadow clone or just that thing Kakashi did sometimes when he made a quick exit. Either way, something major had to be going on. You don't just get woken up early in the morning for nothing. She sighed. Maybe they could grab something to eat on the way there. It would have to be something small and she would need some coffee. She raced up the stairs to the bedroom. "Naruto, wake up and get ready, we have a mission." "Huh?" Naruto said groggily as he rubbed an eye. "What?" He felt something hit his face as he pulled it off, seeing it was Temari's sleepwear. That got him more awake as he looked to see his young wife stripping naked. "Hurry up. We need to shower and get something to eat, and it will save time if we both jump in," Temari said in a practical manner. Even if there was a slight blush on her face, but she couldn't think on that. They had a mission, although she made a mental note to make it a cold one to prevent either of them having any ideas. Yeah, okay. Naruto wasn't sure what was going on. He only heard mission and shower together. He gulped as he tried to get undressed, wondering what was going on. One cold shower later and some toast in her mouth and Naruto slurping the last of an instant ramen cup, they were running towards the Hokage tower. She was grateful that Naruto had taken the time to make 2 shadow clones to make a quick breakfast and get their clothing and gear ready. Temari was cursing that she didn't get her morning coffee while Naruto was still complaining about how they had to use a cold shower. Naruto threw away the ramen cup in a public garbage can before they entered the tower and made their way into the Hokage's office. The door was already opened and they saw Tsunade was there with Shizune, but what was really surprised was Sakura sitting in a chair talking to someone who was drawing an image. Ba-chan, this better be important, Naruto said, irritated that he had to get up early. He liked sleeping in when he could and he actually liked it when Temari was with him too. Tsunade gave him a serious look. This wasn't the look she normally gave him, this was the look of the Hokage. Now that he looked around, he felt a certain tension in the room. He could tell that Temari was feeling it as well. Sakura looked a little ragged as well and she seemed to be favoring her side slightly in the chair. Although Sakura's injuries had mostly been healed, her body was still sore. The bruise on the side of her face was taken care of, but her ribs needed time to heal naturally. They were knitted together now. Apparently one of them had been broken and another fractured slightly. Still, the physical pain she might be in was nothing to the pain she felt in her heart. Sasuke had left them, had left her. She had told him that she loved her. She opened her heart and had it crushed. That's all I can remember. Sakura finished, sounding very odd to Naruto. It was like she was depressed or something, but what could it be? He couldn't remember seeing her like this in his life. A man nodded his head as he finished his drawing and then flipped it over for Sakura to take a look at. Is this accurate? Sakura took a look as her jaw tightened a bit at the image. Yeah, that's her. Tsunade looked at the image as she sighed and turned to Naruto and Temari. Well, while we're waiting for Anbu to find Kakashi, we better get started. Last night while Sakura was walking home, she met Sasuke and an unnamed female. They were apparently packed and leaving the village. What? Naruto couldn't believe hearing that. It's true, Sakura said, looking down at her hands. I found them. I asked what he was doing and he said he was leaving. He said that this village held nothing for him anymore. He was leaving to gain more power and she was taking him away. I tried to shout out, but her hand went to the injury at her side. Although when she had been found, she had been taken to the hospital and healed. When she woke up and said what had happened, the Hokage had been informed immediately. That bastard, Naruto growled out. He didn't understand what he was thinking. Why would he just leave like that? Plus, who was this other girl? He looked at the image but he didn't know her. Then something hit him. Hey, could that be the same girl that Kakashi-sensei said might be the girlfriend Sasuke was supposed to have? Yeah, I think so, Sakura said in a more defeated tone. It was at that time that Kakashi walked into the room. He hadn't known what was going on, only that the Anbu had been looking for him. Which had been a problem as he hadn't been at his place. In fact, he was walking to his home to change as he was still wearing his clothing from last night. Not that anyone would really be able to tell. He and Anko had spent last night together. In fact, it seemed that the two of them were spending more time together and not just for sexual release. Sometimes they hung out just to hang out. But when the Anbu found him, he felt that something was up. Yo, Kakashi said, holding up a hand in greeting. Although he could feel some kind of tension in the room, he could nearly smell that something serious was up. Kakashi, where were you? Tsunade questioned. Anbu said that you weren't at your home. Kakashi knew that he could use one of his normal excuses, but those only worked when he was late. For something more serious, he had to think of a more plausible lie. Despite what people thought, he could be very good at lying if he actually made an effort with it. And telling everyone here that he wasn't at his place because he spent the night at a female's home, one that his students were familiar with, wasn't the best thing to do. I couldn't sleep that well and decided to see if I could get in a little morning training before the day started. He explained, which if anyone looked at his clothing might notice it wasn't as neat as a new uniform should be. Tsunade nodded her head accepting that as she informed him of what happened and Sakura told them the entire story of what happened again. Kakashi took a look at the image and something clicked. When Anko told him about the girl, she had given a brief description of the girl. You might want to have Anko take a look at this image to be sure, but she did say she saw Sasuke with a girl at his place. Kakashi then had to give a brief explanation as to why Anko had been over at his place. Tsunade nodded and told the Anbu to take the image and find Anko and have her verify it was the same girl. She also had Shizune pull up the list of any ninja that wasn't on missions and currently was in the village. If Sasuke was going to Orochimaru, then they had to hurry. The boy already had a lead of several hours. They couldn't let the last of the Uchiha fall into that man's hands, although what they did with him if they caught him was another story. This was a very serious crime and could end up making Sasuke be imprisoned for life. The only thing in his favor for not being executed was because of his age, rank, and this was his only offense. But despite all of that, abandoning a ninja village was one of the most serious crimes a ninja could do. Most rogue ninja that did so, they had hunter ninja after them for their entire life to be killed on sight by the special task force. Tsunade sighed. She was getting too old for this kind of stuff and these children were too young to have one of their own betray them. Even Orochimaru had turned traitor until they were all adults. This was something she knew that would forever change their lives. The kids would take it the hardest. She glanced at Sakura and sighed. She couldn't fault the girl. Tsunade knew what it was like to be heartbroken. In fact, she had gone through it twice. She wasn't sure what was worse, when Dan died in her arms, or for Sakura to know that Sasuke was alive but might be a traitor. At least Tsunade had all those memories of Dan she cherished, but what would Sakura have? It would be hard, but she felt the girl would get over it and might even be stronger for it. Looking at Naruto, she could tell that a lot of emotions were going through that mind of his. He might take it just as hard but for totally different reasons. Temari was looking at Naruto with a sense of sympathy. Well, that was a little strange for Tsunade, but she wouldn't pry too much into private affairs. Kakashi was masking himself, but she knew that for a teacher, he must be going through what the third had gone through with Orochimaru. Tsunade sighed. Some days she wished she could just stay in bed. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.